The next day, Anwar arrived in Pangea city, bringing his subordinates who numbered over 50. 13 personally met them at the gate and escorted them back to the city lord's residence. Paven stared at his former comrade, Brigham, who was bound by metallic chains and was currently lying on the floor. Dixon and this scouting party glared hatefully at the man who had proposed that assassins be sent to kidnap their general's wife and daughter. They were very loyal to General Stark, and anyone who dared to harm him or his family would become their enemies. But, seeing the bruises on the city lord's face, they understood that Anwar had ordered his subordinates to beat Brigham to a pulp, venting his anger. webnovel.com. You set off from Cultivation city with only 4 subordinates in your party, 13 said with satisfaction in his eyes. But, not only did you complete your mission, you've also managed to capture Lord Brigham and gain 50 new allies. I'm very impressed, brother. I was planning to surprise you, but it seems that the one who got surprised instead was me, Anwar replied as he patted Zion's shoulder. What you accomplished puts my effort to shame. Well done, brother. The 2 sworn brothers smiled at each other before talking about the next phase of their plan. Dixon, please let Lord Brigham drink this. 13 gave the leader of the scouting party one of his modified truth serums. Understood. Dixon accepted the bottle that was handed to him by Zion and forced Brigham to drink it. Brother, I already made him drink a truth serum and extracted information from him, Anwar stated. Do we still need to interrogate him? Just watch, brother, 13 replied. You will understand in a while. After Brigham drank the contents of the truth serum, he fell into a daze, making the corner of the 7-year-old's lips curl up. Dixon, make him drink another one, 13 sneered. This bastard is faking it. Brigham's body subconsciously shuddered the moment Dixon was about to force him to drink another bottle. Bastard! Brigham roared as he did his best to prevent Dixon from feeding him another truth serum. Paven, you traitor! Stop them! Anwar's expression became solemn when he saw this unexpected turn of events. He was feeling happy because not only did he manage to capture Brigham, he was able to interrogate him and gather top-secret information. But, after seeing that the truth serum didn't work on Paven, he started to think that the answers that the city lord had given him were all lies as well. In the end, after several of Anwar's subordinates held Brigham down, they were able to force the potion down his throat by punching him in the chest. Before any of them could even react, 13 personally forced another bottle of truth serum down Brigham's throat, making the latter's body start to twitch uncontrollably. Don't worry, he'll be fine, 13 replied as he looked at the city lord, who was given an overdose of truth serum. Half a minute later, Brigham's eyes rolled up in their sockets, showing only the whites of his eyes. Okay, now we can start asking questions, 13 stated. He's now under the truth serum's effects. How did you know that he was faking it? Paven asked with curiosity. Because my truth serum is different from the normal truth serum, 13 replied. If my truth serum works, the one who drank it will only show the whites of their eyes. People with strong will could resist the effects of the truth serums. Because of this, he concocted his own version, allowing him to know whether one was faking it or not. Since Brigham didn't show the reaction he was looking for after he drank the first serum, 13 was certain that the latter was just faking it. Anwar, who had interrogated Brigham after his capture, asked him the questions he had asked before. This time, the answers that he got were the complete opposite of the answers he gained from the city lord a few hours ago. 13 didn't ask any questions and delegated the interrogation to Anwar and Paven. He just listened from the side and let things unfold naturally. When the investigation was done, Norris clasped a black bracelet on the city lord's wrist, which was similar to a slave collar used for higher-ranking slaves. Since it was not possible to put a beast slave tattoo on Brigham's forehead, because it would be visible for all to see, Norris decided to use the tried and tested method of using a slave bracelet, which was several times more powerful than the slave tattoo. Brigham had no power to resist the enslavement ceremony due to his current state, so the transfer of ownership to Anwar was very smooth. Anwar, I want you to work with Lord Paven to oversee the war preparations. 13 said, stay here in Pangea City because this is a much better place to gather information and manpower from the Sumatran kingdom. The leaders of the mercenary groups, as well as the assassin guild, will arrive in a few days. Form a connection with them and get their cooperation. Having you take the reins of our operation here in the Sumatran kingdom puts me at ease. And we're nodded. I understand. What do you plan to do next, Zion? I will return to the Barbarian lands with Lord Paven's bodyguards, 13 replied. Since you have many elite warriors in your team, you can ensure Lord Paven's safety in their place. Lord Paven could only smile bitterly after hearing the younger boy's words. He understood why Zion was doing this, but he still felt bitter after being separated from the people that he had personally handpicked to protect him. Right now, 13 didn't have a surplus of champions and grandmasters to fight for his side, so he needed all the help he could get. This was where the scouting party led by Dixon and the team led by Paven's right-hand man, Peyton, would come in handy. 2 champions and 16 grandmasters. That was the fighting force that 13 would bring back to Groner City to help raise the quality of his personal army. I have a suggestion, brother, Amwer commented. How about you take 10 of my father's veteran soldiers to help you? I'm sure that they will come in handy. No. 13 shook his head firmly. More isn't always better. It would be too suspicious if Norris returned to the Barbarian lands with so many strong Tigerkin warriors in hand. Don't worry. What I have now is sufficient for what I am about to do. Truth be told, 13 didn't want to bring any of Anwer's subordinates to the Barbarian lands because their loyalty belonged to General Stark. Also, it would be awkward to turn them into slaves who would listen to his commands. In order to prevent this problem, he decided to just settle for what he had and just recruit more manpower in the Barbarian lands later on. After finalizing a few things and securing some means of communication, 13 and his people left Parnia City the next day. They arrived at a secluded location near the coast where Norris merchant ship was currently docked. Don't be afraid, Rocky. 13 coaxed a Rocky Balboa who didn't know how to swim. You'll be fine. Tiona also gave her subordinate a few reassuring hisses, making the Rocky snake climb onto the merchant ship and coil itself on the deck. Dixon and his team had imprinted black tattoos on their foreheads, making them 13's temporary slaves. Since Tigerkins without a slave mark were not allowed to wander freely in the Barbarian lands, Norris proposed that they should also have slave tattoos to make them inconspicuous. Dixon and the others were hesitant at first, but 13 assured them that they would not be mistreated. After all, he was Percival's best friend, and he treated Percival like his own family. The Tigerkins relented in the end, not knowing that 13 was just spouting a bunch of bullsh asterisk tea to make them become his temporary slaves. He understood that the moment Percival met them, the truth would come to light, so he needed to make sure that they wouldn't turn against him when they realized that they had been lied to. Of course, they would not know of this until it was too late. Groner City had its own port, and that was where the merchant ship was currently headed. They didn't want to raise a commotion along the borders of the Tigerkin and Barbarian territories, so they took a detour to reach their destination. After 2 days of travel, they finally arrived at their destination. 13 couldn't help but smile when he saw Christopher, Rihanna, Giga Chad, Tyga, Harry, and a few other wanderers on the docks waiting for their arrival. Vasego had flown ahead to inform his people of his arrival, and they all gathered to meet their master and friend, whom they hadn't seen for a few weeks. Tiona also looked happy after seeing a few familiar faces. Although she was loyal to her master, it didn't mean that she disliked the people who treated 13 as their friend and leader. Even Tyga, who didn't like Zion at first, looked relieved when he heard the news of his arrival. He hoped that the 7-year-old would tell him news about his family, whom he hadn't seen since he was taken into the Barbarian lands and forced to become 13's slave. Rihanna couldn't help but smile as she looked at 13's helpless expression, while he was being hugged by Christopher and Giga Chad at the same time. As soon as the 7-year-old descended from Norris merchant ship, the chubby boy and the Chad skunk didn't hesitate to wrap their arms around him, giving him a welcoming hug. Okay, that's enough, 13 said as he lightly tapped the arms of his 2 loyal subordinates, who were so happy to see him again. I'm glad to have you back, young master, Christopher said before wiping the tears in his eye. I'm really glad that you're back. Giga Chad also made whining noises as he poked 13 here and there, as if telling his master that he looked thinner compared to the last time that he had seen him. Frankly, 13's physique hadn't changed much since he arrived in the Sumatran kingdom. He was eating well, sleeping well, and doing whatever he wanted. In fact, he even gained a bit of weight, but since he was always on the move, the added weight only turned into muscles. Norris, I'll head back to the warehouse first, 13 said to the slave master. These kids are creating a scene here. Norris chuckled because their arrival was indeed making a scene. Several tigerkins locked up in cages were being pulled down from the ship, and everyone could tell that they were all warriors. Since the prices of slaves had risen, especially for tigerkins, they were wondering how much these slaves would cost after they were sold. What they didn't know was that these slaves weren't for sale. They were all part of 13's private army, which would be delivered to his warehouse later that day. Norris had already been paid a lot of silver by Lord Paven, so that he wouldn't accumulate any losses for his services. Although the 3 cities, who had the biggest food reserves in the Sumatran kingdom, were attacked during the harvest festival, the kingdom had enough food supply to ensure that none of their people would starve. While Anwer, Paven, and Brigham were dealing with the aftermath, 13 and his team returned to the warehouse to discuss a few important matters. I'm really glad that you're back. Zion, Harry, who had been waiting for the 7-year-old's return, could finally sigh in relief. Since you're here, I can join your team now, right? He enjoyed being part of Rihanna's hunting party because he was able to showcase his expertise. However, the 3 guys, who were vying for the pretty lady's attention, found Harry as an eyesore. Because of this, the scion of the Remington clan didn't feel welcomed in the hunting party and wished to transfer to 13's team as soon as possible. Seeing his expression, 13 couldn't help but smile in his heart because he had already expected this to happen. Of course you can join my team, 13 replied. Welcome aboard, Harry. Thank you very much. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to work you to the bone. After that brief exchange, the younger boy shifted his attention to Christopher and Rihanna, who were seated beside him. I have some good news and some bad news, 13 said. Which one do you want to hear first? The bad news, Rihanna answered. The good news, Christopher insisted. Tyga, who was also in the room, didn't say anything and only stared at the 7-year-old with a solemn expression on his face. He wanted to ask 13 a lot of questions about his family, but the boy told him to wait until the meeting was over. Aside from Rihanna, her 3 core members, Rufus, Jean, and Aaron, were also inside 13's room because he insisted they come to the gathering. But, just like Tyga, they didn't say anything and allowed the pretty lady to handle everything. Even so, it didn't change the fact that the 3 of them were all annoyed because Rihanna was smiling so sweetly, and her smile was directed at 13, who was way younger than them. Okay, let's start with the good news first. 13 nodded. The good news is that I believe I have found a lead regarding the Beacon of Hope. Christopher, Rihanna, Harry, and the 3 other wanderers inside the room looked at the boy with shock. They didn't expect that the good news had something to do with the mission that would send them back home to Pangea. That's great, young master, Christopher said excitedly. We can now go back home. The chubby boy remembered that his young master wouldn't be able to go back with them because he was undergoing the 13 trials. Only when he finished all of them would he get the opportunity to return to their original world. Now, let's talk about the bad news. 13's voice became solemn, making everyone inside the room subconsciously straighten their sitting posture. The bad news is that this war between the Tigerkins and Barbarians is more complicated than we imagined. There's a third party that is targeting the Valbera archipelago, and the only way to stop them is for the Tigerkins and the Barbarians to join hands and fight together. I know that this is hard to believe, but that is the truth. Lastly, we will all need to work together in order for you guys to have a hope of returning home. An eerie silence that lasted for an entire minute descended inside the room after 13 finished talking. Rufus, Jean, and Aaron didn't want to believe the 7-year-old's words. They even believed that the boy was just making things up in order to scare and force them to become his lackeys. But after seeing Rihanna's expression, The three didn't dare voice their opinions out loud in fear that they would lose the pretty lady's trust, which they were working hard to get. Harry found the younger boy's story hard to believe. However, after witnessing how capable Zion was, he decided to take his words seriously. "Well then, what do you want us to do?" Harry asked, breaking the silence of the room. "Follow my orders faithfully," 13 answered. "Then, and only then, will you guys get the chance to survive this upcoming calamity." Rufus, who was unable to continue listening, snorted, catching everyone's attention. "You said that there's a third party that is eyeing the Valbera archipelago," Rufus stated. "But you didn't tell us who this third party is. Are you perhaps making this up?" Although he wanted to get Rihanna's good graces, he wasn't someone who just blindly listened and followed orders. He was a retainer of one of the heirs of a prestigious family, and his loyalty belonged to his true master. "I don't mind telling you," 13 smirked. "But are you sure you want to know? All of you might fall into despair if you hear his name." "Try me." Rufus crossed his arms over his chest and stared straight into 13's eyes. 13 chuckled. "The ignorant are truly fearless." "Very well, I will answer your question. The third party who is manipulating the Tigerkins and the Barbarians to fight each other is none other than a Magian prince." Christopher, who was seated beside 13, shuddered after his young master's revelation. Rihanna's, Harry's, Jean's, and Aaron's expressions also became grim when they heard Zion's answer. Even Rufus, who was feeling fearless earlier, couldn't help but feel intimidated as he looked at 13's green eyes, which seemed to glow with power. "His name is Arundel," 13 added, "and his title is the Destroyer. The same Magian prince who destroyed 3 powerful empires on the main continent is eyeing the Valbera archipelago. I'm very sure that he would love to eat a few wanderers who just happen to be in the same land that he wishes to make part of his domain." A loud thud was heard inside the room, making everyone glance at the chubby boy who had fainted and hit his head on top of the table. Everyone stared at him, but no one laughed because this was no laughing matter. "I don't care whether you believe me or not," 13 declared. "But since I asked all of you to come to this meeting, I have recognized that all of you will play an important role in the upcoming battle. Make sure to keep everything you have heard inside this room a secret, so that the others won't panic. Our priority is to get the Beacon of Hope. If you guys are lucky, you won't need to wait for the Magian to step foot in the Barbarian lands before all of you can return to Pangea. In the worst-case scenario, all of you can just hide until everything is over. I have promised Christopher that I will send him back, so I will find a way to light the Beacon of Hope with or without your help. I just want to remind you all something. The rewards that the Laplace demon and the one will bestow upon you will depend on your contributions. If you don't contribute, then the skills you will gain will be mediocre. But if you cooperate with me and play an important role in the war, you might just become the most powerful rookies of this generation. So, are you all willing to follow me until the end?" Rihanna, Harry, Rufus, Jean, and Aaron glanced at each other before shifting their gaze back to the 7-year-old, who was looking at them with a confident look on his face. All the Wanderers understood what a Magian prince signified, and if what 13 was saying was the truth, then they needed to find the Beacon of Hope before such an entity arrived on the shores of the Valbera archipelago. That was the only way that they could survive the one-sided genocide of an existence whose strength surpassed that of a monarch. Giga Chad and Rocky stared at each other for nearly half a minute before the two monsters exchanged a high five with their claws and tails. Since Rocky was now part of his team, 13 introduced him to everyone to make sure that the Rocky Balboa wouldn't treat them as a snack when the 7-year-old wasn't looking. "This is Blackie and his family," 13 said. "And this is... his name is Hercules," Christopher commented from the side. "Hercules?" 13 blinked, once then twice, as he looked at the obsidian tiger beetle, who had become one of Christopher's monster slaves. The giant black beetle was a rank 3 monster with a very tough shell. 13's original plan was to dismantle the monster for its body parts and craft a sturdy shield that the ogres could use. However, after Christopher nursed the giant beetle back to health, the two got along well. This made Christopher very hesitant to have it killed and dismantled for its monster parts. Maybe this beetle is also a brute-type monster since Christopher and it got along well, 13 mused. Well, I guess it's not a problem. Since his right-hand man didn't want to kill the obsidian tiger beetle, then he didn't mind letting Christopher have his way. The giant beetle wasn't just known for its strong defense. It was also a very aggressive monster, and its bite was just as strong, if not stronger than the hyenas, who had now made the Furvus grasslands their new territory. Having the beetle to protect Christopher was also a good strategy, since he didn't want the chubby boy anywhere near the front lines. After introducing Rocky to the team, the Rocky Balboa burrowed itself in the ground, where it would hide itself until Tiona called for it. Percival and the rest of the Tigerkin slaves were currently talking to Dixon and the other Tigerkin warriors that Norris had delivered to the warehouse an hour ago. 13 had already explained the situation to Percival, but the Tigerkin still sought out Dixon and the others to confirm whether his temporary master was telling him the truth. Truth be told, he was surprised when he saw Dixon and his scouting party arrive at the warehouse alongside the other Tigerkin warriors. Dixon was also Percival's martial arts trainer when he was still safe within the walls of Carabayer City. So, when the two of them met, both were extremely happy because it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. Perhaps feeling that he was now safe with the people he grew up with, Percival told them all the hardships he encountered in Zion's hands, making Dixon, Armand, Thane, and Alina blink their eyes in confusion. 13 had told them that he was Percival's best friend, who gave the Tigerkin food scraps whenever their master treated him ill. The more they heard their young master's complaints, the more they realized that everything that 13 had told General Stark and Lady Briella was a lie. Furbuvel.cm. Dixon and his party didn't know if they should laugh or cry, because even if they wanted to spank 13's bum to oblivion, they couldn't do it because they were now his slaves. He got us good, Dixon said bitterly. He played us well. Armand, Thane, and Alina could only sigh helplessly after understanding that they couldn't punish Zion for his wrongdoings. Don't worry, Percival. Alina patted her young master's head. Zion is not as bad as you think he is. I'm sure that he will not mistreat you now that we're here. But, as soon as Alina finished talking, 13 walked up to their group and placed his hand on his waist. Tyga, go and clean the toilets, 13 ordered. I want them to be sparkly clean. If I'm not satisfied with your work, I'll let Giga Chad give you a good spray. Before Dixon could even confront the 7-year-old for treating their young master like a slave, Percival sprinted towards the toilet as if his tail was on fire. 13's hero in training would rather clean the toilets than suffer Giga Chad's Giga Destroyer, which would make him feel miserable for 3 days. Dixon, I have a rule, and that is those that don't work, don't eat, 13 said in a bossy tone. Go and help the ogres and troll to make arrows. Armand and Thane will help the ogres make weapons. Alina, you can help Jasmine and Ariel cook our lunch. Everyone, hustle. We have a lot of things to do. Dixon crossed his arms over his chest and didn't budge from his spot. All the other Tigerkins, especially those that came from Lord Paven's personal security team, looked at this scene with amusement. They want to know if Dixon would truly ignore 13's words, because depending on how things turn out, they could also do the same. Zion, I came here to help you, Dixon stated. I didn't come here to be ordered like a slave. You said that you've come to help me, but refused to make arrows for our future operation. 13 eyed the Tigerkin, who was looking down on him due to their height difference. I will only help when it comes to fighting, Dixon declared. I refuse to be treated as a slave. Oh, really? 13 sneered. Then kneel before me. As soon as 13 gave an absolute order, Dixon felt a very strong, compelling order to obey his words. However, since he was a champion, he held his ground and endured the pain in his head while gritting his teeth. After a minute, he managed to shake off the command using his willpower, but it came with a price. He was now suffering a terrible headache, which made him feel as if his head was being split in half. 13 wasn't surprised that Dixon was able to resist his order, because he already expected it. The reason why he was doing this was due to the fact that he knew that his new Tigerkin slaves would refuse to listen to his orders. Since that was the case, he needed to set an example to make all of them understand who was the one calling the shots in this place. "How does it feel to defy my orders?" 13 asked in a teasing tone. "Zion, don't go too far." Dixon growled at the 7-year-old, who still had a composed look on his face. "It seems that you still don't understand your situation," 13 sneered before moving to the side. "Giga, let him taste your Giga Destroyer." Giga Chad, who had been informed beforehand what he needed to do, turned around and raised his tail. A second later, Dixon and the rest of the Tigerkin saw a terrifying scene, where a yellow spray descended upon the rebellious scouting captain, making him roll on the ground, screaming in pain. It didn't take long before an extremely pungent smell reached their senses, making them vomit on the spot. All of them then looked at the 7-year-old in horror, because they didn't expect that he was capable of doing something very inhumane. "Who's next?" 13 asked, while scanning the faces of the Tigerkins, whom he had ordered to help with the weapon production in the warehouse. Armand and Thane ran towards the location where the trolls and ogres were working nonstop to make weapons and arrows that everyone would use when they started their operation. Alina also made herself scarce. As a girl, she never wanted to be on the receiving end of Giga Chad spray, so she dutifully obeyed 13's order and rushed off to help Jasmine and Ariel do the cooking. The other Tigerkins also went to work and helped the trolls and ogres make weapons for the little devil, who was eyeing them with a mischievous smile plastered on his face. 2 days after 13 returned to Groner City, all the temporarily enslaved Tigerkin warriors he brought along from the Sumatran kingdom realized that their new master was a devil hiding in human skin. He worked them all to the bone, and he didn't hesitate to use Giga Chad to make them understand who the real boss was. In the end, all of them obeyed, even the 2 champions, Dixon and Peyton. After making sure that his subordinates were diligently following his orders, 13 left the warehouse and met up with Norris. Christopher and Rihanna followed him, curious about what plans the younger boy was up to. When they arrived at the slave market, they found Norris sorting out the slaves that still didn't have a buyer. "Ah, Zion, did you come here because of what we talked about a few days ago?" Norris asked as he glanced at the 7-year-old, whom he hadn't seen for 2 days. 13 nodded. "Yes. Did you get a reply from that person?" "I did. In fact, I was about to send a messenger to your place to tell you the news," Norris replied before handing his records to the subordinate by his side. "But since you're already here, then it will make things easier. Follow me to my office." 13 nodded for a second time and followed the slave master to his tent so that their talks wouldn't be overheard by anyone. Along the way, they came across Adira, who immediately joined their group. "I heard everything from Norris," Adira stated. "You are really a bringer of bad luck." The younger boy pretended that he didn't hear whatever the drow said and continued to follow behind Norris, making Adira click her tongue. Once all of them were in the office, Norris asked Zion and his 2 subordinates to take a seat. "I have talked to Netero, and he agreed to meet with you tonight," Norris explained. "The 2 of you are going to dine in a famous tavern called the Hunter X Tavern." "Thank you." 13 bowed his head with gratitude because Norris had done many things for him. Norris sighed as he looked at the 7-year-old whom he thought of highly. "Zion, me and my people will be leaving the Valbera archipelago in 3 days," Norris said. "We don't plan to get involved in this upcoming war. We're just a merchant group trying to make a living, and knowing what is about to happen, I deem that it is no longer profitable to stay in this place." 13 nodded his head in understanding because even he had thought of leaving the Valbera archipelago to escape to the mainland. If not for the fact that Christopher, Rihanna, and Harry would be stuck in Solterra if he took them with him to escape, he would have already asked Norris to take them with him on his return trip to the main continent. Perhaps sensing what he was thinking, Norris invited him to come with them, and even added that he could bring his subordinates along. However, 13 regrettably shook his head because they had no choice but to stay until they had lit the beacon of hope. "I already expected that you're going to decline the offer." Norris sighed in regret. "But think about it, okay? It will still take us 3 days to resupply before we set sail towards the main continent." "Understood," 13 replied. "Once again, thank you for everything, Sir Norris." 13 stood up and bid his goodbye to the slave master and the drow, who had lent him their support. Without them and the connections they brought him, it would have been a little difficult for 13 to operate in Groner City. After leaving the slave market, 13 didn't head back to the warehouse. Instead, he went to the duel arena where the barbarians gambled their money while watching duels between slaves. Christopher and Rihanna thought that their young master was going to gamble to raise funds. But when they arrived, they realized that he was there for a different reason. "Hello, Mr. Raldo." 13 greeted the manager of the duel arena. "How is Villager A?" "Oh, it's you." Raldo frowned after seeing the 7-year-old, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. "He's always beaten and battered. Frankly, I stopped sending him to duel 3 days ago because his injuries are accumulating. Also, people always bet on his opponent when he appears, so we're taking big losses every time he fights." 13 smirked. "Understood. Then can I take him back?" "Of course," Raldo answered. "I'd say good riddance to him any time. Such a useless human. Can't even win one fight." Raldo ordered his subordinate to take 13 to the place where the slaves were being held. There they saw several cages. Some of them contained monsters, while others contained trolls, ogres, tigerkins, and even human slaves. Raldo's subordinate pointed at a steel cage, where a teenage boy was seated with his head tucked between his legs. His body was covered with bruises, making Christopher and Rihanna frown deeply. "Oi, you have some guests." Raldo's subordinate rattled the steel cage with the stick in his hand, making the teenage boy raise his head. His unfocused gaze looked at the 3 humans who were standing in front of his cage. It took him a few seconds to regain some clarity in his eyes, and the moment he saw Zion, Christopher, and Rihanna, he hurriedly grabbed the handle of the steel cage and cried his heart out. "Please, save me from this place." Colbert begged with tears and snot flowing from his face. "I'll do anything. I'll serve you faithfully. Just please take me away. I don't want to die here. I don't want to die." 13 looked at the teenager, who once instigated a mutiny after he went through the trouble of saving him, Harry, and the other wanderers, who were sold by the orcs to the barbarians. "Do you want me to take you away from this place?" 13 asked. "Yes." Colbert nodded. "I'll do anything. I'll be your slave. I'll do anything you tell me to." "You want to be my slave?" "Yes. I'll be your slave." 13 chuckled internally because what Colbert didn't know was that he was already the child's slave. He had bought him from Norris and asked the slave master to send the arrogant boy to the duel arena so that he would get beaten up by the other slaves and learn the reality of life. 13 wanted to break Colbert until he was pushed into a corner with no one to rely on. Now that his plan succeeded, he was about to extend an olive branch toward the boy, making the latter indebted to him in the process. With all honesty, 13 didn't hate Colbert. In fact, he liked the teenage boy so much that he wanted him to become his subordinate. Colbert wanted to be in control of everything, which was why he manipulated others into siding with him. Unlike Christopher, who was an honest and simple person, he didn't like to scheme or command others. The chubby boy was content to follow orders. Colbert, on the other hand, was just an extra who happened to soak the personality of his true master, whom he believed came from an influential family and probably liked to scheme as well. In short, Colbert was a bootlicker, but he was a very good bootlicker. He would do his best to make his master praise him for doing well and manipulating others to do his bidding. 13 needed someone who could do the dirty work for him, which Christopher couldn't do. Because of this, he wanted to add Colbert to his party after his body and spirit were broken in the duel arena. "Understood," 13 replied. "From today onward, you will become my servant. Serve me well, and I will make sure that you return to Pangea alive. Defy me, and I'm going to send you back here. Do we have an understanding?" "Yes. I promise to serve you faithfully," Colbert replied with tears and snot still flowing down his face. "I promise that you won't regret saving me from this place." "Good," 13 smiled. "I'm sure that we will get along well." 13 wasn't worried that Colbert would go back to his word. The moment he stepped into the warehouse and saw that the 7-year-old was ordering even champions around, the teenage boy would realize that getting on his good side would increase his chances of survival. A bootlicker would always side with the one who they believed held authority and power. For them, it was only by doing so that they would also gain authority and power. 13 understood this very much because he perfectly understood a bootlicker's way of thinking. After making the necessary arrangements, Colbert was freed from the cage and finally regained his freedom. He then looked at the 7-year-old whom he once looked down upon and tried to antagonize in the past. From now on, you are villager A, 13 declared. If you want me to call your name, you will have to work hard to earn it. Do I make myself clear? Yes, young master, Colbert replied. I'll follow you wherever you go. 13 arched an eyebrow after hearing the slave's words. You'll follow me even in hell? 13 asked. Why, yes. Colbert stuttered. Even if the young master goes to hell, I will still follow you. 13 smirked before turning around. Let's go. Christopher and Rihanna followed behind the 7-year-old, while Colbert walked a few steps behind the two. He could tell that there was a pecking order in the group, but he had every intention to climb his way up and gain the power, which would allow him to survive in this world. When Colbert arrived at the warehouse, he immediately realized that the 7-year-old was not only in command of several wanderers, but monsters as well. But what really surprised him was that he also had more than 20 tigerkins, composed of 2 champions and over a dozen grandmasters, under his wing. Only Percival and his party were on the weaker sides, with them being only in the rookie rank. It was then that Colbert made a vow to himself that he must make himself useful to Zion so that he would gain a higher position among the 7-year-old subordinates. You will be staying on this side of the warehouse, 13 ordered. The other side belongs to Rihanna. Make sure you behave. Otherwise, the moment you cause trouble, you'll be sent back to the dueling arena. Yes, young master, Colbert replied. I will behave. 13 nodded before handing a bottle of healing potion to Colbert, which would help to recover his injuries. Drinking potions wouldn't instantly recover any injury. Still, it would lessen the pain and increase the healing speed of the body. Judging by the severity of Colbert's condition, 13 deemed that it would take the boy at least 3 to 5 days in order to have a complete recovery. After Colbert drank the potion, Harry came to talk to Zion about something. The moment his gaze landed on Colbert, the scion of the Remington clan immediately frowned because there was no one he hated more in this world than Colbert. What is he doing here? Harry asked in an annoyed tone. I took him in as my slave, 13 replied. He will be working for me from now on. He's a snake, Zion. Harry glared at the person who had caused his own hunting party to be almost annihilated. Making him your subordinate is a big mistake. I'm telling you this from experience. This guy cannot be trusted. 13 neither agreed nor countered Harry's accusation because he knew very well that Colbert was a piece of sh*t. But he also understood his value, so he just nodded his head to appease Harry. Don't worry. If he does something funny, I'll feed him to the ogres, 13 replied. For now, I'll be giving him a second chance. If you can't be around him, you can go back to Rihanna's hunting party. That way, you don't have to see him again. Harry's frown deepened, but he no longer said anything. Although Rihanna had her own hunting party, the true person calling the shots around here was none other than Zion. Also, he didn't want to return to the pretty ladies' team because Rufus, Jean, and Aaron were treating him like a rival for Rihanna's affection. Although Rihanna was indeed very pretty, he had already seen many pretty and beautiful ladies at the countless parties held by the Remington clan. His resistance to beautiful ladies was higher compared to most teenagers. Seeing that even Harry had no choice but to obey Zion's orders, Colbert felt smug inside his heart. You might be one of the geniuses of the Remington clan, but here you will have to follow this boy's orders. Colbert laughed in his heart. As long as I stick with Zion, I have no one to fear in this place. 13, who could somewhat guess what Colbert was thinking, chuckled internally. His brainwashing was proceeding smoothly, so it wouldn't be long before his villager A started singing his tune. After sending Colbert to his room to rest, 13 discussed a few things with Christopher and Harry before going to his room to take a nap. He would be meeting with Netero after the sun set, and he wanted to be wide awake if ever their discussion were to last past midnight. This talk with the old man was very important. Through him, 13 could connect with the person whom he needed to meet. If he were to gain the city lord's support, his future plans in the Barbarian lands would proceed more smoothly. Since Anwar and Pavan were working together to prepare the Sumatran kingdom for the upcoming war, he needed to have someone from the side of the Barbarians who would also help him do a few things before the Magian prince arrived in the Valbera archipelago. A few hours later, 13, who was accompanied by Dixon and Peyton, went to the Hunter X Tavern to meet with Netero. 13 brought the two champions with him to make a statement that he wasn't there to play games with the old man. His time was limited, and at most, he only had 2 to 3 months before the war officially started. With Norris and possibly Adira leaving the Valbera archipelago in 2 days, 13 would lose 2 allies in Groner City. Since that was the case, he needed a few more allies to replace them, and he needed those who sat in high places. He and Netero had only become acquainted during the auction. Perhaps the old man thought that having a nice chat with the boy who had made an impression on him would be a good way to pass the time. Since he wasn't told about what he and the 7-year-old would be talking about, Netero thought that the boy simply wanted to form connections with him, so he decided to agree to his proposal to meet. Fortunately, when they arrived at the tavern, 13 didn't have to look for the old man because one of Netero's subordinates was already waiting for their arrival. The boy had asked Dixon and Peyton to temporarily decrease their presence so that no one would be able to tell that the two of them were champions. "You must be Zion," a middle-aged man said as soon as the boy entered the tavern. "The master is waiting for you. Please come this way." 13 nodded and followed the middle-aged man to the second floor of the tavern, where the private rooms reserved for the VIP guests were located. It didn't take long before they reached their destination. The person who guided them lightly knocked on the door to announce their arrival. "Come in." After getting Netero's permission, 13, followed by Dixon and Peyton, entered the room. "Well, it seems that this meeting of ours is going to be more interesting than I initially expected," Netero said after glancing at Dixon and Peyton, who were standing on Zion's left and right sides. As a champion, he was able to immediately sense that the two Tigerkins beside the boy were champions as well. It didn't matter if they hid their true rank, because Netero could easily see through their attempt to downplay their rank. 13 glanced at the old man before he shifted his attention to the man seated beside Netero. "We meet again, boy." The city lord of Groner City, Arthas, smirked as he looked at the 7-year-old while holding a wine cup in his hands. "Netero said that you'd be meeting with him, and I thought that it would be more fun if I tagged along." It seems that he was right. 13 smiled because the person that he wanted to meet the most was here. While it was true that he wanted to talk to Netero, his true reason for talking to him was to ask the old man a favor. This favor was to let 13 have an appointment with the city lord in order for the two of them to discuss something very important. Since Arthas was already here, it saved him the trouble of looking for the city lord. He needed the former to be his backer, allowing him to move unhindered in the Barbarian lands, where one of the pawns of their true enemies was currently making his moves in the dark. "Greetings, Lord Netero. Greeting, Lord Arthas." 13 bowed respectfully to the two most influential people of Groner City. "Good boy. Now sit and eat to your heart's content," Netero replied. "Your subordinates can also join us as well." "Thank you, Lord Netero." 13 smiled and ordered Dixon and Peyton to sit beside him and eat. The two Tigerkins stared at the two champions in front of them, as if assessing their strength. Netero was only at the initial stages of the champion rank, so for them, he wasn't a problem. The only real threat was Arthas, who was at the peak of the champion rank. But since they didn't come here to fight, they just did what Zion told them and started eating. "I thought that this is going to be a fun discussion, but it seems that you're here for other matters," Netero commented after drinking some wine. "Norris told me that he will be returning to the main continent in 3 days' time. Does his move have something to do with the topic that we are going to discuss right now?" "Yes," 13 answered. "But I don't think that this will be a good place to discuss such things, Lord Netero. There are many ears listening to our conversation." "It's that serious, huh?" Lord Netero played with his beard for a bit before glancing at Arthas, who was eating beside him. "Is it important enough for him to hear of this as well?" 13 nodded. "Yes, Lord Netero." "Then, in that case, we should eat first," Arthas said after he finished chewing a chicken leg. I don't want to talk about serious matters on an empty stomach. Since the city lord had already spoken, 13 no longer said anything and helped himself to the delicious food that had been served on the table. None of the men talked and only ate at a leisurely pace. It was as if what they were about to talk about wasn't that important. An hour later, their group left the tavern and headed straight to the city lord's residence. There, Arthas took them to his meeting room, where they could discuss important things without worrying about being overheard by others. Start talking, boy, Arthas ordered. This better be important, or else I'm throwing you in the slave duels. 13 held the city lord's gaze before nodding his head in understanding. First, let me tell you the reason why Sir Norris and his merchant group are leaving the Valbera archipelago, 13 stated. It's not because the war between the Tigerkins and the Barbarians is just a few months away from happening. It is because there is a threat that they deem to be far more dangerous than the war between the two races. Lord Netero and Arthas both frowned because they didn't understand what the boy was talking about. How could there be a greater threat than the war between the two overlords of the Valbera archipelago? First and foremost, although there have been skirmishes between the two sides, no one really wants to have an all-out war with each other, 13 explained. This only changed a few years ago when both sides started to seriously prepare for a war that would decide who would be the ultimate ruler of these lands. But what both sides were not aware of is that a third party has been fanning the flames from the outside and is only waiting for both races to suffer countless casualties before they make their move. The mastermind behind this war understands that once the two factions have exhausted their strength, conquering the Valbera archipelago will be easier. This is the true motive behind this upcoming war. Lord Netero had an amused look on his face, while Arthas was clearly not believing 13's words. He had already expected this, and had made preparations beforehand. During the past few weeks, I've been staying in the Sumatran kingdom after I was captured by the Tigerkins. During our expedition in the Furvus Grasslands, 13 smiled bitterly. There I met General Stark and was forced to stay in their residence as a captive. Do you know who General Stark is, Lord Arthas? I know him. Arthas shrugged. He is a general loved by his people. Good. That will make things easier. 13 then pointed at Dixon, who was seated at his right side. This is Sir Dixon. He is General Stark's right-hand man, and the leader of the scouting party that captured me in the Furvus Grasslands. Lord Netero and Arthas narrowed their eyes as they looked at the Tigerkin, who looked back at them with a fearless gaze. Due to some circumstances, we discovered the true mastermind, who is manipulating the war from the shadows. Because of that, I decided to act. What I did was burn the granaries of Pangea City, Dun City, and Rocinda City. I know that the only way to stop the Tigerkin army from marching to the Barbarian territory is to destroy their logistics and ensure that they won't have enough food supplies for a large-scale war. To give you a better understanding of the scope of the damages that I did, these 3 cities are the cities where the largest granaries in the Sumatran kingdom are located. Right now, they are busy dealing with the food shortages happening on their side, making everyone postpone any talks about the war for the time being. If earlier, Lord Netero and Arthas thought that this talk was just some random delusion of a 7-year-old, he had captured their attention now. Can you confirm that what you told me is the truth? Arthas inquired. You do that yourself, 13 replied. I'm sure that the Barbarians have spies in the Sumatran kingdom. Since they're already there, you guys will get this information any day now. Lord Netero and Arthas glanced at each other. Truth be told, they were already aware that there was an incident that happened in the Tigerkins' lands because Netero was the one handling the exchange of information between their spies. The reason why they were also in the tavern earlier was to celebrate the suffering of the Tigerkins and feeling good that their own war preparations were almost done. Since the Tigerkins were now crippled, there was a high chance that the Barbarians would be able to win if they struck first. I'm sure that the Barbarians are now raring to start the war with the Tigerkins, but the fastest you can prepare for this campaign is a month's time. By then, the Tigerkins will have already stabilized their situation. Although they cannot take the initiative to wage war, they still have the advantage because they will be on the defensive. By the time you guys cross the strait between the two islands, They will have already decimated a quarter of your forces before you were able to step foot in their lands. Lord Netero and Arthas didn't deny 13's words because they knew that this was a possibility. The first thing that the Tigerkins would do was to increase their watchers, facing the sea, allowing them to anticipate any raid from the barbarians. Now, I will tell you who the mastermind behind this war is and why thieves targeted your home after the auction ended. 13 eyed the city lord with a solemn expression on his face. The third party who is manipulating this war is a Magian prince named Arundel the Destroyer. Have you heard of him? Lord Netero and Arthas both shook their heads at the same time. It will be best if you ask Sir Norris about it, 13 commented. Since he is from the mainland, he will know more than me. But let me tell you this, what you will learn must not reach the ears of others, because the moment he hears that someone found out about his plan, he will not hesitate to stop playing games and strike immediately. Lord Netero started playing with his beard as he looked at the boy in front of him. This is an amazing story, but I find it hard to believe such a tale. Lord Netero smiled. Although I may not have heard about Arundel the Destroyer, I know what a Magian prince is. Even if the barbarians, orcs, and the Tigerkins join forces, fighting against such an existence is a hopeless battle. In short, there is no need for him to do a roundabout way of conquering the Valbera archipelago. If he came here personally, both the Tigerkins and the barbarians would submit to him. Although it is shameful, we will not fight a battle that can't be won. 13 sighed before shaking his head. You don't understand Magian princes, Lord Netero. There are two reasons why Arundel is not attacking you guys personally. The first one is entertainment. For Magian princes, Conquest is all about entertainment and showing the other Magian princes how resourceful and cunning they are. They are very powerful beings in the first place, and only those who have the same level of strength as them can fight them. A Magian prince who is able to conquer an empire without personally making an appearance is proof of his strength and wisdom. In short, this is their way of getting bragging rights among their peers. The second reason is because the Valbera continent has something that can potentially threaten him. That is also the reason why the thieves had tried to steal something from the city lord, because he is in possession of an artifact that can put all the Magian princes planning to waste. Lord Netero glanced at Arthas and immediately saw the scowl that appeared on the city lord's face. Yes, Lord Arthas, 13 said in a solemn tone. The only thing that can threaten a Magian prince is currently in your hands. Dixon and Peyton, who were sitting beside 13, looked at the boy with shocked expressions on their faces. Neither of them had been aware that the third party that was behind the war was actually a Magian prince. 13 didn't tell them anything, and the only reason why he didn't mind sharing this information with them now was because they were already his slaves. With a word from him, the two champions wouldn't be able to share this news with anyone, which would prevent the news from spreading. Tell me, Lord Arthas, did the thieves manage to steal that artifact from your hands? 13 asked. This was a very important question because depending on Arthas' answer, he would have to adjust his plans accordingly. Half, Arthas replied. The thieves only stole half of it. I see. 13 pondered. Thank you for being honest with me. In exchange for telling me this information, allow me to tell you who the lackey of Arundel is among the barbarians. He is also the one responsible for stealing the artifact from your hands. His name is Galescar. Impossible. Arthas immediately interjected. It can't be him. He can't be a traitor. 13 shrugged, because he didn't really care whether Arthas believed him or not, because he had a plan to make the city lord believe him. Since you have the other half of the treasure, I'm sure that it will resonate once we get close to its other half, 13 said. I plan to visit Drata City to retrieve the other half of your artifact. If you want, you can join me. That is the only way for you to see and confirm with your own eyes whether I'm telling the truth or not. But since I don't know what it looks like, can you let me see the other half of the artifact? That will give me a clue for what to search for. Arthas pondered for a bit before taking out the medallion that he was wearing on his neck. He didn't pass it over to 13 and simply held it in his hands, forcing the boy to look at its design and memorize it. A Ferris, 13 muttered. I should have known. Now it makes perfect sense. The The golden medallion that Arthas was holding had a single symbol in it, which read Faceoff. It was an ancient language that meant wealth, abundance, and material gain. It looked like the letter F, but the only difference was that the two horizontal lines connecting to the vertical line were slanted upwards. FreeWebnovel.com. A Ferris. Arthas' eyes widened in shock. How did you know that this is part of a Ferris? 13 raised his hand to stop Arthas from saying anything because he had reached some kind of enlightenment, and he didn't want to be disturbed, while he organized the information that was pouring inside his head. Arthas reined in his emotions and waited for the boy to answer his question. 5 minutes later, 13 regained his composure and looked at the city lord with a grim look on his face. City lord, did you try to use the complete Ferris in the past? 13 inquired. Did you succeed in activating it? Yes, Arthas answered, while looking at Zion with suspicion. But nothing happened. 13 patted his chest in relief, because the worst-case scenario didn't happen. A Ferris could only be used once, so this meant that he still had a chance of activating it. Listen to me, Lord Arthas. I now understand how we can defeat the Magian Prince, 13 said with conviction. But I need your help to retrieve the other half. It is of the utmost importance that we retrieve it before the war starts. Without it, we're done for. Even as 13 spoke, various thoughts and ideas flowed inside his head, making him curse not only his father, the system god, but Laplace demon, and the one as well for giving the Wanderers a mission that was nearly impossible to complete. He doubted that there was anyone who knew how to activate a Ferris among the Wanderers, which would ultimately cause their mission to fail. 13 didn't know if this was just a coincidence, or his father, the system god, sent him to the Valbera archipelago for this very reason. He didn't want to believe that his old man had something bigger in mind, but as things stood, he could not think of any other reason why he spawned in the Houdini Desert and met with the other Wanderers whose mission was to light the beacon of hope. Seeing that he was losing control over his emotions, 13 forcefully took a few deep breaths in order to calm himself down. Once he had regained his composure, he gazed at the city lord with an unyielding gaze. Lord Arthas, come with me to Drata City. 13 met the city lord's gaze steadily. The truth is waiting for you there. 2 hours later, 13, Dixon, and Peyton arrived back at the warehouse. The 7-year-old had ordered the two champions to keep everything that they heard a secret from everyone. After making sure that the two understood how serious the situation was, he ordered Christopher and Giga Chad to watch over the door of his room, to prevent anyone from entering. Although Christopher and the Chad skunk had no idea why they were given this order, they decided to obey and sat in front of the door of Zion's room to act as guards. With the chubby boy and the chubby skunk guarding the door, 13 was certain that no one would disturb him. Taking a deep breath, 13 calmed his senses before speaking out a sentence. I want to invoke Article 13 of the contract. As soon as the boy said those words, the world around him suddenly lost all of its colors before it shattered into countless pieces. 13 found himself staring at the celestial realm, where a giant sun shone brightly above his head. The boy's gaze then landed on the two most powerful beings that governed Solterra and Pangea, who had long been expecting his arrival. We have been expecting you, 13, Laplace Demon said with a smile. You guys had me in the first round, 13 replied with a smile of his own, but it didn't reach his eyes. I knew something was off when I was suddenly sent to Solterra despite not being of age. Even though my old man is a god, he still can't possibly bypass the laws of this world. Doing so would pose extreme harm to him because this world is not under his jurisdiction. The three of you are surely in cahoots with each other. Congratulations, you got me really good. Oh, dear me, I have no idea what you're talking about, 13. Laplace Demon placed his hand over his head, looking hurt. To think that you would accuse us of such wrongdoing. It breaks my heart to hear you think that way. Oh, please, can we stop this farce? 13 sneered. Since I'm already here, let's get down to business. I already understand the big picture, and I know you guys are troubled because the Wanderers, who had been sent to the Valbera archipelago, have no chance of completing their mission. Not to toot my own horn, but aside from me, I doubt that any of those first-timers have any idea about how they are supposed to light the beacon of hope. Let me guess, my old man told you that as long as you toss me there, the chances of those kids surviving will not be zero, right? TSK. I will seriously demand heavy compensation if I survive this calamity. 13 knew that Laplace Demon and the One wouldn't come clean and would deny whatever he was going to say, so he didn't plan on continuing this topic any longer. Just thinking about it infuriated him. But then again, if he wasn't sent to the Houdini Desert, then Christopher, Rihanna, Harry, and the other wanderers would meet their doom once the Magian Prince arrived. The system god knew that 13 would at least try to save those who happened to cross his path, especially cannon fodders like Christopher. It should also be for that same reason that the 7-year-old appeared exactly where Christopher was going to arrive, allowing the chubby boy to meet the system of cannon fodders. I'll be frank, my current skill set will not be enough to beat a Magian Prince, 13 stated. I need some modifications in the contract. As if waiting for that cue, Laplace Demon snapped his finger, and a table and chair materialized in front of the boy. In the center of the table was the 100-page contract that he had signed, which he planned to modify for this mission. I will listen to your suggestions, but there is no guarantee that I will approve them, Laplace Demon stated as he summoned another chair and sat in front of 13 with a grin. 13 clicked his tongue, knowing that the Laplace Demon was a tough nut to crack, especially when it came to negotiations. First and foremost, I need to add a few people and monsters to the list of those who can receive techniques from me, 13 demanded. And they are? Laplace Demon asked, arching his eyebrow. Christopher, Tiona, Brutus, Bruno, Giga, Blackie, Rocky, and Hercules, 13 answered. Also Anwar and Taiga. I will need their help as well. He wanted to add Hans to the list as well, but he knew that the Laplace Demon would not allow it. At least, not yet. Laplace Demon pondered and summoned a piece of paper, which materialized in front of him. He then took a pen from his coat and placed it over the piece of paper, which he pushed toward 13. List down the abilities you plan to give them, Laplace Demon ordered. I believe you're going to use rune magic to achieve that. Yes? I'll see if what you want to happen is possible. Especially for the Domini Mortis. It's a special creature, so if you were planning to allow it to rank up, then I suggest that you scrap that idea. We will not allow it. I know that already, 13 grumbled as he picked up the pen and pulled the piece of paper toward him. He started scribbling the abilities he wanted to impart to his subordinates. A few minutes later, he handed the paper back to Laplace Demon, and the latter scrutinized it. This is an interesting lineup of abilities. Laplace Demon eyed the 7-year-old, who was looking back at him as if he owed him billions of gold coins. Especially the ability you plan to give Tiona. Predation? This basically means that even though she will stay as a rank 1 monster, she will gain abilities beyond her race and rank. 13 shrugged. I doubt it will be enough against a Magian Prince. Laplace Demon narrowed his eyes because he clearly knew that 13 was going all out to extort them due to his current situation. Aside from Tiona's predation ability, all the other skills that the 7-year-old planned to give his subordinates were acceptable. If a Domini Mortis was allowed to devour other monsters and absorb their skills, even if it were to stay a rank 1 monster forever, it would still be a very dangerous entity. I'll allow it, but there will be limitations. The one spoke before Laplace Demon could even make a decision. Tiona can only absorb 10 abilities max. If you want to give her additional abilities once the limit is reached, you just need to override one of the abilities she already possesses to make way for the ability of your choice. 13 frowned, but in the end, he agreed to this condition. He was already prepared for the predation ability he wanted for Tiona to be turned down, but fortunately, the big boss decided to give them the go signal. One more thing. I need to bring some backup with me, 13 added. I need my Gramps, Arthur Leventus, to appear in the Valbera archipelago. Rejected. Laplace Demon and the One didn't even need to consider and outright rejected 13's proposal. Although I don't know how you will succeed in this mission, I have a feeling that you plan to use this opportunity to make your grandpa jump to the rank of a monarch by facing a Magian Prince, right? Laplace Demon scoffed. Not under my watch. Fine. 13 decided to take a step back and made another proposal. But I need Pops to come a grown city for me. The 7-year-old even wanted to bring his mother as well, but if he asked for that, no one would look after Shasha and Remy. So he decided to compromise and bring his father as reinforcements. Also, please give him the mission of lighting the beacon of hope as well, 13 stated. That way, if I'm going to kick the bucket, I'm going to bring him with me to the afterlife. The corner of Laplace Demon's lips twitched as he looked at the no-good son, who planned to bring Gerald to Groner City. Since having your grandfather come here is impossible, you chose to bring your father instead. Huh? Laplace Demon rubbed his chin. Also, you want him to get the quest lighting the beacon of hope. It seems that you plan to make him a champion instantly after clearing the mission, correct? Right. 13 nodded. Originally, I wanted Gramps to jump from throne to monarch and make him own me. But since that's not possible, I'd like to at least have my father here to assist me. Let his reward be stepping into the champion rank. Gerald, who could no longer come to Solterra due to the assassin organization, Death Wish, had reached a stagnation in his rank. Someone wouldn't rise in ranks just because they could absorb countless Jinn and Majin cores. They had to finish a ranking up mission, which would be given to them to proceed to the next stage. Fighting against a Majin prince was enough for a throne to jump to the monarch rank. Similarly, successfully clearing the mission was more than enough for a grandmaster to rank up to a champion. 13 really wanted to bring his mother, Alessia, as well. That way, she and his father could become champions at the same time. But he decided not to. There was a chance that they would fail in their mission, and if that happened, Shasha and Remy would be left without both parents. He didn't want to take such a risk, even though he believed that there was a chance to succeed. This is really bending the rules, the Laplace Demon frowned. This is truly unprecedented. Well, you started at first by bringing me to Solterra. I'm sure that the moment I return to Pangea, everyone will panic because this is the first time that someone below the age of 13 has been sent to Solterra. Do you even understand the repercussions of your actions? Laplace Demon pretended to not hear 13's complaint and pondered if bringing Gerald to the Valbera archipelago was acceptable. 13 had the "I will not take no for an answer" gaze, making his stance known. Finally, after several minutes of negotiation, the 7-year-old added one more condition, and that was allowing him to use rune magic to fight against the Majin Prince. Although reluctant, Laplace Demon and the One agreed to his request because this was already part of the contract that 13 had signed long ago. It was part of Article 100, which stated that 13 was allowed to use rune magic when he was faced with the situation of fighting someone of the monarch rank and above. But this clause also stated that this condition would only be approved if the monarch or someone of higher rank was actively targeting 13 and his family. It was a self-defense clause that was included in the original contract. 13 was merely exercising his right to invoke the contract, but Laplace Demon still added a few conditions. The condition was as follows: any items, regardless of shape, size, and form, which 13 would imbue with rune magic to fight against the Majin Prince would disappear once the threat was gone. These included the items that would be used to fight against the prince's subordinates. 13 agreed to the condition and signed the revised contract. A moment later, the Laplace Demon grabbed the 7-year-old and temporarily took him back to Pangea, so he could briefly reunite with his family. Alessia sighed for the umpteenth time as she closed the Book of Alchemy in her hand. It had been a few months since Zion had disappeared, and she was very worried about him. Although the latter had sent their family a letter through Laplace Demon. As a mother, she still couldn't help but feel worried about her 7-year-old, who should be home with them right now. Suddenly, Remy, who was initially sleeping on the couch beside her, raised her small head as if she had felt something in the distance. The 4-year-old then walked toward the sliding door that led toward the backyard. Alessia followed her youngest with her gaze, but the moment she saw someone on the other side of the door, the book in her hand dropped to the floor. The sliding door opened wide, and Remy didn't hesitate to wrap her arms around her big brother, whom she hadn't seen for months, and then started crying her eyes out. There. Don't cry, Remy. 13 lovingly patted her sister's head and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Why are you crying? Woo woo woo. Remy continued to hug 13. Water. Before Alessia knew it, she was already running toward her 2 children and wrapped her arms around them. Sha, who suddenly heard Remy's cry, rushed toward the living room from the training ground with her sword ready to strike. But the moment she saw Zion, she joined her mother and sister and hugged him as well. Girls are really loud, 13 mused as the 3 girls cried while hugging him. Thinking that her mother and sister were playing a game of who could cry the loudest, Remy increased the volume of her cry, making even Gerald, who was busy in the forge, come running to her rescue. However, when he saw the reason why his girls were crying, Gerald joined them and hugged his son, who had suddenly returned to them. After a few minutes, 13 decided that enough was enough and asked everyone to back away. He was only given a short period of time to stay in Pangea, so he didn't want to waste it by listening to his family's cries. Pops, I need your help, 13 said as he looked at his father. You got it, Gerald replied. I don't know what kind of help you need from me, but consider it done. I plan to bring you with me to Solterra to fight against a Magian prince. 13 blinked innocently. Okay, no biggie. It's just fighting a Magian pre. Gerald paused, as if realizing something. Thinking that he only misheard his son, he decided to ask Zion to repeat what he said a while ago. What? I plan to bring you to Solterra to fight against a Magian prince with me. You unfilial brat. Do you want to kill me? Gerald smacked the head of his no-good son, making the latter rub his head in pain. Alessia and Remy, who didn't approve of Gerald hurting Zion, immediately started pounding him with their closed fists. Only Shasha didn't do anything to harm her father. Instead, she lightly rubbed 13's head, helping ease the pain he was feeling. Gerald, who was being wrongfully beaten by his wife and youngest daughter, raised his hands in surrender and asked his son about the details of his mission. After listening to everything, Gerald's and Alessia's faces turned grim because he didn't expect that their son and the other wanderers who had been brought to the Valbera archipelago would suffer such a fate. Zion, how did you manage to come back here? Gerald inquired. Did Laplace Demon help you again? 13 nodded. I said that it's impossible with just me alone and that I need some backup. I was planning to ask for Gramps, but Laplace Demon and the One rejected me. Gerald and Alessia glanced at each other before shaking their heads helplessly. They knew no one in Pangea could casually talk about the Laplace Demon and the One as if they were people giving away brochures and flyers in the streets. Zion, tell me, is there a chance for us to win? Gerald asked. I will gladly do everything in my power to help you, but fighting against a Magian prince is way beyond my abilities. Pops, I wouldn't tell you to come with me if we had no chance of winning, 13 replied. In fact, I even wanted to bring Mother with us, but I decided not to ask for it in the end. Someone needs to look after Shasha and Remy while we are away after all. I'm not going to lie and say that it's going to be easy, but right now, I need all the help I can get. Also, this is a good way to have you promoted to the champion rank. I'm sure that when you return to Solterra to face off against those assassins from Death Wish, they will definitely suffer losses in your hands because they wouldn't have known that you've already become a champion. 13 then looked at his mother and sisters with a calm expression on his face. The ultimate goal is for all of us to reunite once again and eat at the same table, 13 said softly. For that to happen, I plan to work hard and survive regardless of the obstacles that I am facing. Right now, I'm faced with a tough opponent that even monarchs will not be able to fight easily. But as long as Pops is with me, there is still a chance of victory. Mother, Shasha, Remy, believe me when I say that no matter what happens, I'll make sure to return Pops home safely. How about you? Alessia asked. Aren't you going to return after this mission ends? 13 smiled bitterly before shaking his head. I might have to stay in Solterra for a little longer. But if I can survive a Magian prince, I think no one in the world can threaten me anymore. So, you don't have to worry, Mother. I will definitely return. Gerald held Alessia's hand and gave it a light squeeze. Alessia, I know. Make sure that Zion is safe. Gerald gave his wife a hug and a kiss on the cheeks before returning to the smithy to grab some items that he would be taking with him to Solterra. A few minutes later, he stood with his son in their backyard, where a small portal opened up to allow them to enter. "Pops will be back in 3 to 5 months, Mother," 13 said. "Don't worry, I'll keep him out of trouble for you." Alessia nodded and kissed 13's cheeks. Shasha and Remy did the same, making the 7-year-old's chest feel warm. "I guess this is what it means to have a family," 13 thought as he hugged his mother and 2 sisters goodbye. "Let's go, Pops. Let's." The 2 then entered the portal, sending them directly to 13's room in the warehouse. The moment they arrived, Gerald looked at his surroundings and almost jumped back when he saw a black snake looking up at him from the floor. Just as Gerald was about to attack Tiona, 13 stood in his way, making Gerald stop his attack midair. "Calm your tits, Pops," 13 stated. "Tiona is my beast companion. She's not a threat." As if to prove that he was telling the truth, he picked the snake up from the floor and allowed her to coil around his neck like she usually did. "Tiona, this is my father," Gerald, 13 said. "Father, this is Tiona." The black snake hissed at Gerald as if greeting him. Nice to meet you too, Tiona." Gerald smiled stiffly because he had recognized what kind of breed the snake was. He had a lot of questions in his head, but he decided to wait for a proper time to ask them. For now, he just wanted to know his son's general situation, so he could better understand what kind of plans he had to face off against a Magian prince. "So, everyone, let me introduce to you my pops," 13 said. Gerald Leventis, the patriarch of the main branch of the Leventis family. He was studying some ruins, and before he knew it, he was teleported to my location. I don't know how it happened, but all I can say is that it's a happy accident. With him by our side, we will be able to do many wonderful things. Christopher, Rihanna, Harry, and the rest of the Wanderers blinked in surprise after hearing 13's explanation. It was truly surprising for the 7-year-old's father to coincidentally appear where his son was. Although some were still in doubt, they had no choice but to accept Zion's story. After all, they couldn't come up with a plausible explanation as to how Gerald got teleported to their location. But Gerald's appearance wasn't the only thing that surprised them. It was actually Zion's announcement that his father was the patriarch of one of the 10 prestigious families. As citizens of Pangea, it was impossible for them to not know who the patriarch of the Leventis family was. After all, there were only 5 monarch clans and 10 prestigious families. Everyone in the world of Pangea knew who the patriarchs of these families were, so Zion's statement made them all wonder if he was just joking with them. "Hello, I'm the patriarch of the main branch of the Leventis family and Zion's father," Gerald declared with a devilish smile on his face. "Thank you for taking good care of my son. Now that I'm here, I'll make sure that you kids get back home, especially you, Harry." 13 nodded in agreement. "That's right. I still need to cash out my attack helicopter from the Remington family for saving your life." Even Gerald, who was feeling smug earlier, couldn't help but pretend that he didn't hear his son's statement. He might be very close with Harry's parents, but his skin wasn't thick enough to ask them for something like an attack helicopter just because Zion saved their son's life. Harry, on the other hand, wasn't able to stop himself from lowering his head to avert his gaze. He had a feeling that if Zion were to appear in the Remington clan's main residence, his parents might have no choice but to accept his demand due to how pushy the 7-year-old was. "I know that you still have doubts, but my father really is the patriarch of the Leventis family." 13 raised his chin in arrogance. "My grandfather, Arthur, even knelt and begged him to not make this knowledge known to the public. So, for the time being, please keep this a secret, okay? I don't want my Gramps to lose face. Well, although my old man is a good-for-nothing, I, as his son, still think of him as my family." Gerald smiled, as if he was a very kind and benevolent person. "For this reason, I allowed him to call himself the patriarch of the Leventis family until Zion comes of age. After that, I will announce the news to the public that I am the new patriarch of the Leventis family. Until then, let's all get along, okay?" What followed next was an awkward silence, because none of the Wanderers seemed to know what to do. However, all of this was broken by the sound of someone clapping, pulling everyone's attention to the source of the sound. As expected of Lord Gerald and young Master Zion, Colbert said as he continued to clap his hands. It is my honor to meet the true patriarch of the Levinus family. I, Colbert Riggs, am lucky enough to be blessed by your presence. Gerald looked at the young man fondly and nodded his head in satisfaction. Freewebble.com. I like you, kid, Gerald commented. My son said that you were his left-hand man. I look forward to working with you from now on. Yes, my lord. Colbert placed his closed fist over his chest and bowed very low. I am yours to command. 13 gave Colbert a thumbs up in his heart. As expected of a first-rate bootlicker, breaking you was worth it, 13 mused as he gave Colbert a faint smile. Christopher, who suddenly felt as if the new guy was trying to usurp his position, felt threatened and wanted to also try his hand at bootlicking. But before he could do that, Giga Chad hugged him from behind and covered his lips, preventing him from saying anything. 13 understood what was going on in the chubby boy's head, but he didn't want Christopher to copy Colbert's way of doing things. As his right-hand man, he wouldn't allow Christopher to grovel and lower himself to such a level. Because of this, he gave Giga Chad instructions beforehand to stop Christopher if the boy ever tried to imitate Colbert's methods. The trolls, ogres, tigerkins, Warzer blackhounds, Rocky, and Hercules were all standing behind the Wanderers, observing the man whom Zion introduced as his father. They were paying close attention to him, because if he was really their devilish master's father, then they might share the same characteristics, which was making them feel anxious. Gerald, who had no idea what the others were thinking about, started his speech. I heard the general situation for my son. Gerald crossed his arms over his chest. And truth be told, this upcoming war will be extremely dangerous. However, do not fret. As long as you follow my son's lead, everything will be fine. I'm not here to give you any orders. I'm only going to play the role of a supporter. The one whose orders you will take is Zion, and only Zion, Gerald declared. As the man who raised him, I know that he is just as capable as I was when I was his age. So, all of you are in good hands. Zion, who had just been praised, also crossed his arms over his chest and made his own speech. Although my father is a henpecked husband, I guarantee you that he is a very formidable person, 13 stated. He will play a vital role in the upcoming war. So although he said that you'll only be taking orders from me, I hope that you will assist him in any way that you can. Gerald, who was standing beside his son, fought the strong urge to smack his son's head for calling him a henpecked husband in front of everyone. If not for the fact that the boy was acting as the supreme commander of everyone gathered today, he would have already given him a good smacking. Rihanna couldn't help but giggle after hearing Zion's words. Her reaction somewhat eased the tense atmosphere, making the other wanderers and slaves breathe easy as well. My father is a blacksmith, and he is proficient in creating bronze, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, and low-grade adamantine weapons and armor. 13 scanned the faces of the people around them, highlighting his father's importance. His role is to arm all of us to the teeth, because we will be participating in this war. Of course, those who don't wish to fight may stay on the sidelines. But you will not be idle and will be put in charge of the logistics. Your job will be making sure that we have enough supplies like food and ammunition for the war that will take place in 2 to 3 months. You will also be in charge of all the miscellaneous tasks needed to guarantee our victory. Remember, the bigger your role in this endeavor, the greater your reward will be when you rank up to rookies. The Wanderers, who easily caught 13's meaning, all stood at attention. They had already forgotten that the rewards for clearing the mission would depend on the contribution that one had given to the cause. If the mission was completed and they didn't do anything substantial, they would gain very small and mediocre rewards from the one who governed all Wanderers in the world. This made all of them take Zion's words seriously, which was what the 7-year-old was aiming for. My father will be busy in the next few days, but feel free to write down your name and your preferred choice of weapon and armor that you would like him to craft, 13 said with a smile. Making peak bronze weapons and even pseudo-silver grade weapons is easy for him, so I guarantee that you will get the best weapons and armor at your disposal with your current rank. Of course, the priority is given to those who will be accompanying us on on expeditions. But even those who are playing the supporting role will also get their own share. I just want to give all of you one order and one order only. 13, who had now assumed full command of everyone, including Rihanna's hunting party, stared at all of them with a solemn expression on his face. Don't die, 13 ordered. Your families, friends, and loved ones are all waiting for you back home. All the Wanderers' eyes moistened after hearing 13's orders. Even though life in Solterra was hard, they still hadn't given up on going back home to Pangea. Percival and the other Tigerkins clenched their fists because they, too, had people waiting for them back home. They had no plans on dying, and they would do everything in their power to survive. Seeing everyone's current expression, a faint smile appeared on 13's face. Although it would be difficult to save everyone, he would do his best to let the kids go back to Pangea and escape the calamity that would befall the Valbera archipelago. Are you sure about this, Adira? Norris asked. Are you really going to stay? Adira nodded. I've already made up my mind, Norris. My master had given me an order to stick with the person who has gained the loyalty of the Domini Mortis. If he survives this calamity, then our organization will greatly benefit from having a good relationship with him. Seeing the strong determination in the Drow's eyes, Norris no longer tried to convince her to return with him. Understood. But prioritize yours and Zion's safety, Norris stated. I will leave a seaworthy vessel in one of the enclaves we discovered long ago. You could take Zion and anyone he wants out of this place and sail back to the main continent. If things really become too dangerous, just knock him out and drag him away by force if you have to. Adira smirked, because that was exactly what she was thinking. If things really got too dangerous, she would knock Zion out and drag him away by hook or by crook. I will surrender the ownership of this place to you, so feel free to do anything you want with it as you wish, Norris added. This is bigger than Zion's warehouse, and it also has more amenities. You can convince him to move his base of operations over here if you like. That sounds lovely, Adira commented. Since I'll be left alone, I might as well do that to make every day interesting. Norris smiled faintly as he looked at the time on the pocket watch in his hand. We'll be leaving in 3 hours, Norris said. I'll just say goodbye to Zion before I go. Do you want to come with me? Adira shrugged. Might as well. A few minutes later, the slave master and the drow arrived at the warehouse and immediately saw the flurry of activities everyone was busy with. It didn't take long before they found Zion, who was currently talking to Christopher about something important. Hey, Zion, Norris shouted. I came here to say goodbye. The 7-year-old glanced at the slave master's direction before patting Christopher's head. Sir Norris, thank you for everything, 13 said as he walked toward the slave master in order to shake his hand. I wouldn't have been able to do many things if it weren't for your help. Indeed, Norris nodded. You drove me like a slave, even though I was supposed to be the slave master. You sure are bold, boy. 13 chuckled because he couldn't refute the slave master's words. He had indeed worked Norris like a slave back in the Sumatran kingdom, but he was the only one whom he could count on to enslave the Tigerkins and make them subservient to their cause. Can I ask a favor? 13 grinned. When you get back to the mainland, try to look for information about a teenage boy who goes by the name Mikhailovinus. He is my brother, and he's probably wandering all over the place with a bunch of beautiful girls by his side. Norris laughed before patting the boy's shoulder. Damn you, little devil. Even as I leave, you still order me around. Even Adira, who was standing beside Norris, found this exchange quite amusing. Be safe, Sir Norris, 13 said in a solemn tone. I guarantee you that we will meet again. And please, prepare the finest slaves you can find. I will need some good slaves once I arrive in the main continent. But no friend discounts, okay? Norris smirked. Also, no dragging me to conflicts involving you-know-what. 13 chuckled. No promises. The slave master couldn't help but shake his head helplessly, but deep inside, he really hoped that Zion would survive so that they could reunite in the mainland. Being around the boy was fun, and he wouldn't mind going on a small adventure with him again in the future. Here's the thing, Zion, Adira commented after the two finished saying their goodbyes to each other. The slave market is transferred over to me. But since everyone will be gone, only I will remain. Norris here also made a proper smithy for you guys, and it has some leftover or that can still be used. So how about it? Want to move house? I'm sure that the accommodation will be to your liking. 13 didn't even need to think and immediately nodded his head. Thank you for the offer, Lady Adira, 13 replied. I'll happily accept your offer. The drow smiled sweetly because she knew that 13 would not pass up such an offer. Because of this, she decided to stay until they finished moving to the slave market. After 13 announced that they would relocate their base of operations, everyone moved like a well-oiled machine and packed things properly. Since the Wanderers didn't have many belongings, their preparations were done quickly. It was only 13's side that required a lot of heavy lifting. Fortunately, everyone worked together, speeding up the process. 3 hours later, several wagons made their way to the black market. Since the black market spanned a wide area, with many structures and rooms ready to be occupied, 13 made sure to get the best accommodation for himself and his inner circle. 13, Gerald, Christopher, Colbert, Rihanna, Harry all got the best rooms, while Tyga and the others settled for the good rooms available. Adira, who was introduced to Gerald by 13, was surprised when she met the 7-year-old's father. Just like everyone else, she doubted Zion's explanation, but in the end, she had no choice but to accept it. Fortunately, Gerald had no plans of going anywhere aside from the smithy, where Bruno was assisting him as an apprentice blacksmith. After receiving permission from the one, 13 planned to teach Bruno the hammer for all seasons later that night to increase the ogre's proficiency with smithing. Gerald was also surprised when his son told him that the ogre would become his assistant. At first, he thought that the ogre would just do some heavy lifting by bringing him or to craft. However, this notion completely disappeared when Bruno began pounding on a piece of heated metal and started to shape it into a crude shield. Seeing Bruno's determination to learn, Gerald felt some sense of kinship with the ogre and decided to teach him a few things that he learned along the way. A few hours later, just as 13 was about to enact his plan to give his subordinates some divine techniques, someone arrived at Slave Market and asked for him to meet them. Recognizing who had come, 13 immediately welcomed the knocking guests and invited Lord Netero and Arthas to his room to talk in private. Seeing that the city lord of Groner City had come to him personally, 13 believed that he had already made his decision about whether he would follow the boy to go to Drata City or not. Before we start, I would like to ask you 2 questions, Arthas said as he gazed at the boy in front of him. You said that the other half of my medallion is in Drata City, correct? If my guess is right, then yes, 13 replied. I could be wrong, though, but that would mean that the other half of your medallion was taken somewhere else. But if I were Gale, I would definitely keep it somewhere close to me to ensure its safety. My second question, do you know how to activate the complete medallion? Yes, but there are a lot of preparations that must be made beforehand. It will be our key to winning this war against the Magian Prince. Arthas nodded. Fine. I'll give you one chance to prove to me that you are telling the truth. I will go to Drata City with you. I too will go, Netero commented. I can't believe Gale is behind such madness. I refuse to believe it until I see the proof with my own eyes. 13 eyed his 2 guests before sighing deeply. Okay, we leave in 2 days' time, 13 stated. Something came up, so I need to make some preparations in advance. It'll be best if we move in a small group. So, how about just the 3 of us going to Drata City? Having more will just attract suspicion to our group. That's fine with me. Arthas nodded. Good. Then we meet here in 2 days. Make sure that both of you wear proper disguises. Understood. After that brief discussion, Arthas and Netero both left to make their preparations. 13, on the other hand, called Christopher to his room and ordered Giga Chad and Brutus to guard the door. Young master, why did you call for me? Christopher asked with curiosity. I called you here to give you a reminder and a gift, 13 replied. Christopher, I already said that you are my right-hand man. Don't copy Colbert and turn into a bootlicker like him. There are things that only he can do, and things that only you can do. So whatever happens, don't become jealous of him. I trust you more than him. Also, I will never throw you away. Do you understand? 13 was the system of cannon fodders, so he understood more than anything else that some conflicts and wars were caused by misunderstandings. Because of this, he wanted to be frank with Christopher so that the chubby boy wouldn't have to worry that he was about to be thrown away. "Yes, young master," Christopher replied, feeling relieved that 13 had made their relationship clear. "I'm sorry for being weak-hearted." "It's fine," 13 replied. "But remember this. What I'm going to do next must be kept a secret from the others. I will make you inherit one of the peak gold-grade techniques of our Levinus family main branch. This will help you become stronger, so make sure to carry this knowledge to the grave." Christopher was shocked after hearing that he would be given a peak gold-grade martial technique. All gold-grade martial techniques were the pinnacle techniques of the human race. Having one was enough to ensure that a family would become a powerhouse, which was why some families kept their techniques as a hidden treasure. "Young master, this is very precious." Christopher's face almost lost all color from both fright and excitement. "I can't accept this." "Oh, then I guess I'll just give it to Colbert then." 13 nodded. I changed my mind, young master," Christopher replied with a determined expression on his face. "Please bestow this technique upon me." 13 chuckled internally because he knew that using Colbert's name would rile up Christopher's stubbornness. Right now, he didn't trust Colbert enough to give him a divine technique, and what he told Christopher just now was a mere bluff. After asking Christopher to take his shirt off, 13 scribbled the runes on his body, using the marker pen that he took from his house when he returned to Pangea. Pavan, who was the city lord of Parnia's city, didn't hesitate to give Zion all the djinn and beast cores he could carry inside his storage ring. With the provided resources, he could impart his divine techniques to the people and monsters who would play a vital role in their fight against the Magian Prince. 13 planned to give Christopher 2 divine-ranked martial techniques. The first one was the same skill he had, which was Cheap Shot Savant. He wanted Christopher to not engage the enemy in close combat, because he didn't have any talent in it. Having this martial technique would ensure that the chubby boy would be able to hit his targets from a distance, keeping himself safe. The second martial technique was a movement technique called Triathlon Finisher. It may sound funny, but this is truly a divine martial technique that was created in a world where racing was the most popular sport. This movement technique only focused on 3 things, and that was running, swimming, and riding as fast as possible. Just like the name implied, it covered 3 movement techniques in one. It would allow Christopher to run very fast on land, swim very fast in water, and empower his mount to run, fly, and swim faster. His original plan was to give Christopher the Road Runner martial technique, which would make him unmatched when it came to running on land. With that martial technique, no one would be able to outrun Christopher once he mastered it. But as the name suggested, the said martial technique had a limitation. It could only be used on land, making it inflexible. With the Triathlon Finisher movement technique, all of Christopher's bases would be covered whether by land, sea, or air. The only downside was that its speed was only half of the Road Runner martial technique. However, 13 believed that it was more than enough to allow Christopher to survive any danger that would target him. With these 2 techniques, he was certain that whoever Christopher fought against would go mad with anger. Employing the hit-and-run tactic, he could strike his enemies from a distance, run away, then strike them again. It was truly a dastardly strategy, which would make his right. Handman peerless in the future. It took 13 2 hours to transfer the 2 techniques to Christopher, leaving him drained afterward. 13 then slept for 4 hours, ate dinner, and proceeded to transfer a divine technique to Tiona. The reason why Laplace Demon and the One hesitated to allow 13 to bestow this power to Tiona was due to her nature. The divine technique, predation, would allow the Domini Mortis to learn one skill from another creature after she ate it. However, the One made a condition that Tiona would only be able to store 10 skills at a time. If she wanted to add something else, she would have to dispose of a skill to make room for another. 13 was fine with this, since he knew that adding more would become too much of a burden for the Black Snake, who would remain a rank 1 monster for life. However, he was confident that if she got the right set of skills, she would become a threat to anyone whose ranks were higher than her. "Bear with it, Tiona," 13 said softly as he looked at the writhing snake, who who was absorbing the power of predation. Unlike the martial techniques that he bestowed upon his family and Christopher, predation required to change Tiona's body to a cellular level, rearranging her genetics so that she could cope with her new ability. Tiona hissed in discomfort as she endured the pain. She knew that her master was doing this for her own good, so despite the pain, she persevered till the very end. An hour later, 13 carried the unconscious snake to the bed, allowing her to rest comfortably. Although Tiona's eyes were open, she remained motionless, forgetting to even coil up like she usually did. When you wake up, you will become the strongest Domini Mortis in the world, 13 muttered. You will also play a crucial role in the defeat of the diabolical hyena. The 7-year-old was already planning to feed a portion of the rank 6 overlord to Tiona. As long as she gained one of its abilities, then they would profit greatly in their collaboration with the purple-furred honey badger, whom he planned to visit after his mission in Drata City was finished. One step at a time, 13 said softly as he laid beside the unconscious snake on the bed, lightly placing his hand over her body. "Good night, Tiona." 13 fell asleep immediately because he was truly exhausted from imparting divine abilities to his 2 loyal subordinates. Tomorrow, he planned to give Bruno the hammer for all seasons and Taiga the skill, Golden Emperor. He would be leaving Groner City with Arthas and Netero, so he planned to finish this task before he handled the traitor of the Barbarian race. "So that's Drata City," 13 muttered as he looked at the city, which was slightly bigger than Groner City, from the carriage window. "Make sure to follow our lead, boy," Netero commented. "Don't forget that the 2 of you are my servants, and that I'm only here for a sightseeing trip. As long as we stick to our identities, I'm sure no one will find out who we are." "Relax, Gramps," 13 replied casually. "Unlike you and Lord Arthas, I'm an expert in infiltration. I'm more worried about the 2 of you messing things up, you know, Arg." The 7-year-old placed both of his hands on his head because Netero smacked it with his walking stick. It was impossible for him to block a champion strike with his current rank, so the only thing he could do was grumble and curse the old man in front of him in his heart. Tiona hissed angrily at Netero for hurting her master. If not for the fact that Netero could easily neutralize her whenever he wanted, she would have already lunged at him with her fangs, ready to kill. "Then tell me, Mr. Expert, how do you propose we handle this mission?" Arthas asked with a smug smile on his face. "Personally, I think sneaking inside his residence is the fastest method. As long as Netero and I work together, we will be able to neutralize him right away. Isn't that right, old man?" "If I were still young, perhaps," Netero replied. "But you shouldn't underestimate Gale Scar very much. He wouldn't have risen up the ranks to become a city lord if he were mediocre." Arthas reluctantly nodded his head, knowing that what the old man said was true. All the city lords of the barbarian cities were capable individuals who were personally chosen by the barbarian king. This was why he couldn't understand why Gale decided to collaborate with a being who wished to conquer the entirety of the Valbera archipelago. 13, who had an idea of what Arthas was thinking, didn't say anything and remained silent. FreeWebnovel.com. He really didn't care about Gale's reason for collaborating with the Magian Prince. After all, if he was in his place, he might have done the same. That was how powerful and terrifying these princes were. They stood at the apex of the Magians, and they were even stronger than monarchs. The only reason why they still hadn't conquered the entire world was thanks to the 7 Celestials and the 7 Fiends who ruled several domains in Solterra. The Magian princes might be strong, but the 14 deities were even stronger. In fact, Arundel the Destroyer didn't dare conquer the Valbera archipelago in the past because it held a symbolic meaning to one of the 7 Fiends, who went by the name Fornius. This fiend was a sea monster whom the 7 Celestials and even its fellow fiends didn't want to antagonize. He was a hot-headed deity who was easily triggered and wouldn't hesitate to fight against other deities if they were to annoy him. While he wasn't as murderous and unhinged as the Fiend of Lawlessness, Belial, Fornius was still at the top list of deities who shouldn't be angered no matter what. So, why was Arundel eyeing the Valbera archipelago? The answer was simple. Fornius no longer cared for it. After helping the islanders once in the past, it never bothered them again. Also, Arundel asked for the guidance of the Magian princess, who went by the name Camrasipa, asking if Fornius still had a lingering attachment to the Valbera archipelago. She was a seer, so many djinns and magians sought her wisdom before making any moves. Ironically, Camrasipa was also the ruler of one of the largest human kingdoms in Solterra. She was an eccentric Magian princess who had learned to coexist with the humans, and she would only eat criminals to sate her hunger once a year. Because of this, her city was the most crime-free city in the world, allowing her people to live in peace. According to her, Fornius no longer cared about the Valbera archipelago. As long as Arundel didn't touch the third island, which was considered a holy place, the sea monster wouldn't bat an eye even if Arundel were to annihilate all the humans in the island. After gaining this information, the destroyer laid out a plan to conquer the Valbera archipelago without having to send his own people to conquer it. Just like 13 had mentioned, Magian princes and princesses thought of conquest as a form of entertainment. If they were able to conquer a territory without even lifting a finger, it meant that they were very cunning and capable individuals. This was also why the 7-year-old was confident that, as long as he was given enough time, he would be able to deal with the variables that might arise in the war. "Welcome, guests," the innkeeper of the Silent Hill and greeted with a smile. "How many rooms?" "2 rooms," Netero replied. "Make sure that one of the rooms has 2 beds for my servants." The innkeeper nodded and fetched a key behind him. "Come this way, please." The innkeeper led the 3 people to their rooms, which were located adjacently on the 3rd floor of the inn. Netero chose the inn that was nearest the city lord's residence, allowing them to observe it from a distance. After escorting them to their rooms, the innkeeper left to tend to his duties. The 3 then gathered inside Netero's room to discuss their next course of action. "Fortunately, they still have plenty of unoccupied rooms," Netero smiled. "We came at the right time." "You did well, Netero," Arthas commented. "This is indeed a good place." Seeing that they were celebrating too early, 13 looked at the 2 barbarians in disdain. If not for the fact that he had used the same trick in Karabair City to capture the assassins, who were targeting the general's wife and daughter, he wouldn't have noticed the trivial things that he observed inside the inn. The boy then started scribbling something on a blank scroll, using a piece of charcoal from his dimensional storage. Netero and Arthas wondered what Zion was doing. But after the boy finished writing, he pushed the scroll toward the 2 barbarians, allowing them to read the message he had written. "I've heard that Drata City has many delicious dishes," 13 said with a smile. "Master, we should try some of these dishes while we're here." Netero and Arthas glanced at the list of foods that the 7-year-old wanted to eat. "You made a mistake in choosing this place as our temporary base, old man. This inn is under the direct control of the city lord. Anyone who books a room in it is placed under strict observation. If you don't believe me, glance out of the window and check the inn right beside our room. You will see someone peeking from their window and paying close attention to us now." Netero and Arthas, who was quick on the uptake, both chuckled and looked at the boy with smiles on their faces. "Zion, you're such a glutton," Netero commented. "We just arrived, and you're already thinking about eating? Very well. Let's see if there are any restaurants around here." Arthas walked toward the window and glanced at the street to check the surroundings. Of course, he made sure to extend his senses on the window facing their room, and he realized that there was indeed a person behind the window who was concealed by a curtain. "You're in luck, Zion," Arthas said before looking at the boy. "I found one good restaurant. Do you want to check it out later?" "Yes." 13 nodded happily. "Fine." Netero sighed. "Let's go eat first. Then we go sightseeing tomorrow." The 3 then left the inn to eat at a nearby restaurant. The 2 barbarians didn't know how Zion knew that they were being spied upon, but they silently sighed in relief. Thinking back, they didn't say any unnecessary words earlier that might have made them suspicious in the eyes of the watchers who were paying close attention to them. When their meal ended, the 3 returned back to their rooms and made sure to close their windows. For now, the 3 of them decided to rest and not do anything suspicious. Anyway, they were a bit tired from their journey, so they spent the rest of the day sleeping. The upside to this was, when they wake up the next day, they would have the energy to do some exploring. Bestow looked at the city lord's residence from the treetops and eyed the servants who were doing their duties with a dumb look on his face. Poca was doing the same, but she was situated on the opposite side of the residence. This allowed the two Pocos to cover more ground, making sure to memorize the names, faces, and voices of the people whom they saw that day. Since 13, Arthas and Netero were unable to move freely. It was up to the two birds to do the scouting for them. The only saving grace was that Netero had only booked the inn for 2 days, so they were able to relocate to a different inn without arousing suspicion from their watchers. 2 days later, the three of them left and even thanked the innkeeper for his hospitality. This time, 13 did the picking to ensure that they wouldn't be subject to anyone spying on them. The inn that the 7-year-old chose was called Colorful Autumn Wind, which was located at the city center. Due to the younger boy's suggestion, Netero booked the biggest room, allowing the three of them to stay in the same room. They had already wasted 2 days, so they decided to make up for it by starting to formulate a plan to infiltrate the city lord's residence. But according to 13, infiltration was nigh impossible. Unlike Paven, Gale was a truly meticulous man. He had employed 5 champions to guard his residence, making it a challenge for Arthas and Netero to slip past their defenses. But that didn't mean that they had no options. Compared to the two barbarians, 13 took this infiltration mission more seriously. Aside from Bestow and Poca, he also brought another helper with them. Rocky, hidden deep underground and only waiting for Tiona's order to resurface, was in Drata City as well. In fact, the Rocky Balboa was currently hiding under the Colorful Autumn Wind Inn. The younger boy had given Rocky 2 divine abilities, and they were Silent Digger and Mobile Stronghold. The Silent Digger ability allowed Rocky to dig on the ground undetected by champions and, to a certain extent, by thrones as well. It was a powerful stealth ability that only worked underground. It was used by one of his previous hosts, who was both a grave robber and a treasure hunter. Mobile Stronghold, on the other hand, allowed Rocky to swallow up to 50 creatures and carry them inside his body wherever he went. In short, Rocky became a storage ring of sorts that allowed living objects to be stored inside his body. The funny thing was that the creatures he had swallowed would find themselves in a fertile land with fruit-bearing trees and a small lake, where they could fish and draw water. There were even 20 cottages inside, which could be used as accommodations. Rocky was the perfect monster for these 2 abilities, allowing 13 to travel undetected underground. This was his last resort if things went south. Although he believed that he had a chance of allowing the Wanderers to clear their mission and return to Pangea, his defeat against the system god made him more cautious. Also, even if the Beacon of Hope was lit, he would still remain in Solterra, so having the Rocky Balboa as a mobile fortress was a game-changer for him. "I've got some good news," 13 said with a smile. "A tournament will be held 2 days from now, and the city lord will be there to personally preside over it. It is the perfect opportunity to infiltrate his residence, because some of those champions will accompany him as his guards. However, we only have 1 chance, so we cannot fail in this mission. So, I propose that I be the temporary leader of this operation. As long as both of you cooperate with me, I am confident that we will be able to accomplish our goals and leave this place undetected." Arthas and Netero glanced at each other before nodding their heads in agreement. Truth be told, they came to Drata City without any plans. They thought that they could easily infiltrate Gale's residence and neutralize him because both of them were champions. The city lord was only of the Grandmaster rank, so they were confident that they could handle him easily. They didn't expect him to have 5 champions guarding him, which came as a surprise to Arthas and Netero. It didn't take long for Arthas to realize that these 5 champions might be the same champions that had infiltrated his residence and stolen things from his treasury. 13's goal for bringing Arthas and Netero to Drata City was to convince the 2 of them that everything he said back in Groner City was the truth. As long as they found evidence of Gale's betrayal, the younger boy would gain 2 allies, which would help him operate in the Barbarian lands. "We still have 2 days, so we should explore the city and have fun," 13 said. I believe that we are still being held under suspicion, so I want the three of us to act as tourists. Will we find evidence by acting as tourists? Arthas arched an eyebrow. We won't. 13 shook his head. But Tiona will. The 7-year-old then rubbed the head of the black snake that was coiled around his neck with his finger. She will handle the rest, 13 said. All we need to do is keep a low profile. Before leaving Groner City, the boy fed the black snake a few beast cores, which allowed her to gain some new abilities. Of course, since the abilities that she could gain were completely random, it was a hit and miss. However, it didn't matter because he had plenty of cores at his disposal, allowing him to gear Tiona for this mission perfectly. He had calculated the risks involved, and he would never allow the black snake to get hurt no matter what. She was his beast companion, and he cared for her just as much as he cared for his family and Christopher. That night, Tiona dug underground and crawled towards the direction of the city lord's residence, while being accompanied by Rocky. Their mission was to find any hidden underground basements or places where an altar could be placed. After seeing the altar in Paven's residence, Tiona could detect similar artifacts as long as she was within its range. Her master had also amplified her detection abilities, extending its range. With this, she would be able to remain hidden underground, without the need to risk her life in trying to find a location of the altar where Gale was using to communicate with Arundel the Destroyer. Tiona had a good memory, so she was able to pinpoint the exact location of the city lord's residence, even if she was digging under the ground alongside Rocky. The Rocky Balboa was there to help protect her, just in case something went south. It was still a rank 5 monster known for its toughness, so escaping with Tiona was not a problem. If the champions really wanted to run after it, they would have to have a powerful digging ability that could outrun it in its own environment. Remember, Tiona, no matter what happens, don't enter the residence. Just try to find if there is anything suspicious from a safe distance. Prioritize safety above all. That was the reminder that 13 told the Black Snake before she left to do her mission. Because of this, she remained at a safe distance and merely extended her senses to get a better understanding of the layout of the residence. Before leaving on this mission, 13 had given Tiona several cores, giving her a different set of abilities. The first one was detection awareness. This allowed Tiona to instantly sense if someone had detected her presence, allowing her to escape as fast as she could. The second one was rarity detection. This was a power that could be used to detect precious gems, ores, and artifacts within a 50-meter radius around her. Tiona had been in the presence of the altar in Pavin's hidden basement, so she was now familiar with the sensation of being near the round mirror that Pavin used to communicate with the mage and prince. The third skill that she possessed was enhanced awareness. This ability amplified the power of her detection abilities, further expanding their range. Since Tiona could naturally pinpoint the location of both the living and the dead, she was able to sense the life force of the people inside the residence. Although she didn't know who these people were, she could tell their rank due to the brightness and intensity of the aura that surrounded their bodies. Tiona's fourth skill was a very rare skill that she luckily gained after eating an extremely rare rank 6 beast core in Pavin's collection. Originally, 13 had wanted to use it as an ingredient for a weapon, but since he was unable to wield anything above the bronze rank, he decided to try his luck and let Tiona absorb it. The result was an incredible skill that allowed Tiona to basically infiltrate anywhere, passing through concrete and steel walls with ease. The skill was called Unblocked Passage, which belonged to an ethereal monster that could pass through walls and other physical barriers like a ghost. Unfortunately, that rank 6 monster was weak against any type of elemental skill or abilities. So although it could escape easily, it was still killed in the end by a powerful warrior of the Tigerkin. Her fifth skill was called Hyper Reflexes. Just as the name implied, Tiona's reflexes had a significant increase, allowing her to react in time and perform the necessary movements within her capabilities. The sixth skill in her arsenal was Increased Speed, doubling her movement speed in any terrain. Her seventh skill was called Vulture's Eye, which increased the range of her vision. The eighth skill was Voracious Flesh Eater. When activated, it gave Tiona a set of razor-sharp teeth, allowing her to chew on flesh, which was something that snakes didn't do. Just like all the snakes in the world, they only devoured their prey whole and did not chew them like humans and other animals. 13 had stumbled upon this interesting ability and decided to let Tiona keep it. Since she had the predation ability, the 7-year-old thought that perhaps she could learn new abilities by eating a monster's flesh instead of its core. Due to time restriction, he was still not able to test out this skill of hers. But even if it didn't work the way he envisioned it to be, it was still a good skill, which had many uses. Her 9th skill was called Harden. This doubled the hardness of her body, which was very useful when she transformed her body into steel, making it twice as hard, granting increased protection. If Tiona lived long enough and was able to transform her body into adamantine, perhaps no weapon in the world would be able to cut her down so easily. The last and final skill that Tiona possessed was Blink. This skill allowed her to instantly teleport 5 meters away from her original location. Although she couldn't use it consecutive times, she would be able to use it once every 2 minutes, making it a very important means of escape if ever she needed to run or dodge an attack aimed at her direction. All in all, 13 used over 150 cores to get Tiona's current skill set. It was a staggering number of resources that the 7-year-old wouldn't have freely used if not for the fact that he got them all from Paven's collection. He still had dozens of cores with him, but he planned to use them for his rune magic, so he was forced to stop after his stockpile dwindled to the double digits. Even so, he didn't regret his decision because, for him, Tiona's safety was of the utmost importance. Armed with these skills, Tiona confidently did her mission and surveyed the entire residence. She made sure to stay out of the detection range of the champions that were guarding the residence. Since she was deep underground, the champions weren't able to sense her because they were focusing their detection around them and not under them. After half an hour, Tiona found an object of interest, but it wasn't located inside the residence. No, it was actually an underground passage which she believed to be used as an escape route that the city lord could use in case something unexpected happened. This passage was long and spanned for 300 meters deep inside the mountain. Drata City was built on the base of a mountain, and the city lord's residence was right under it, making it an ideal hiding place to conduct things that mustn't be seen by the public. Tiona and Rocky followed this path until they reached its end. Sensing that there was no life force in the surroundings, Tiona took a gamble and poked her head out of the ground to see everything clearly. After glancing at her surroundings for a few seconds, Tiona didn't hesitate to retreat in order to report to her master about her findings. Just like 13 had predicted, there was indeed an altar which Gale used to communicate with the Magian Prince. Armed with this knowledge, they would be able to investigate while the city lord was away and look for the other half of Arthas' medallion. 13 believed that if the two parts were merged together, it would become the beacon of hope. This was the key to defeating the Magian Prince, who was unaware that a little brat had appeared to mess up his plans for conquest. But the boy knew that having the key was not enough to overturn the situation. He would need to set a trap for Arundel, and for that to happen, he would need the cooperation of the Barbarians and the Tigerkins. Two races who weren't aware that they had become the unwilling pawns in a chess game between the Magian Prince and a 7-year-old, who was once the system of cannon fodders. 2 days later, Gale and 3 of the champion bodyguards under his command headed toward the arena, where he would preside over the duels on that day. Vesego and Poca, who were paying close attention to the city lord's movements, watched him from the rooftop of the houses, making sure that he wouldn't deviate from his destination. Only after seeing the city lord finally enter the dueling arena did they fly away, moving toward a narrow alley where 13, Arthas, and Netero were waiting for them. Vesego made a chirping sound, informing 13 that their target had finally arrived at the arena. 13 chirped back, thanking the 2 Pocos, and ordered them to continue their surveillance. A second later, the 7-year-old ordered Tiona to call out to Rocky, who was hiding in the ground beneath their feet. The moment Tiona gave the order, the head of the Rocky Balboa poked out of the ground and swallowed the 7-year-old whole. Arthas and Netero didn't make any moves and allowed themselves to be swallowed by Rocky as well. This wasn't the first time that they had been devoured by the Rocky Balboa. In order to assure them that everything was under his control, 13 demonstrated Rocky's ability, which surprised the two champions. At the time, they even thought that all Rocky Balboas had this ability. Knowing their thoughts, 13 told them that this wasn't the case, and Rocky was only able to do this because he was a mutant variant of his species. Although Arthas and Netero were doubting whether the child was telling the truth or not, they had no choice but to trust the boy who was waiting for them inside the dimension inside Rocky's stomach. I still can't believe that something like this exists, Netero sighed. Hey, can you sell me Rocky? I promise to give you a good price for him. He's not for sale, Lord Netero, 13 replied in a heartbeat. We've already talked about this before. No matter how many times you ask me, the answer will remain the same. Fine. I'll give up for now. Tisk. The corner of Arthas' lips curled up into a smile as he listened to the banter between the two. The more he interacted with the 7-year-old, the more he understood that he couldn't underestimate him. Aside from having a Domini Mortis as his beast companion, he was also very smart for his age. Not only that, but he was also full of surprises, making him hope that there wouldn't come a time when the two of them would become enemies. Several minutes later, Rocky informed Tiona that they were nearing their destination. The Black Snake passed this information to her master, who passed it to Arthas and Netero. Remember this very important thing before we emerge from Rocky's mouth, 13 said in a solemn tone. No matter what happens, don't touch anything. Whatever treasures or artifacts you see, keep your hand away from them unless I verify that they aren't dangerous. One mistake, and we could be discovered, so it will be best if we take things in order. This is especially true for your Lord Arthas. If we see the other half of your amulet, don't snatch it right away. I wouldn't put it past Gale to put some kind of spell on it that will alert him if it was taken away from its hiding place. Arthas nodded in understanding. Very well, but I'm not leaving unless I get it. I want to make that clear. That's why we're here, right? 13 shrugged. Once you confirm that the Magian Prince is real, I need you to put your trust in me. In the future, I will need your amulet because it is the key to beat the Magian Prince. I hope that you will trust me enough to give it to me for safekeeping when that happens. Arthas nodded for the second time. As long as you can prove to me that you're not just making things up, I will assist you in any way that I can. I also promise to help you, on the condition that you are telling us the truth, Netero commented. If you're just lying to us, I'll take this Rocky Balboa as compensation for our trouble. 13 didn't even bother to answer Netero's subtle threat, and simply asked the two champions to prepare to get ejected from Rocky's body. Somewhere inside the mountain, Rocky swam under the ground like fish in the water. His destination was none other than the spacious cavern which he and Tiona had discovered during their scouting mission. After making sure that no one was inside the cavern, the Rocky Balboa emerged from the ground and spat out the 3 people inside his body. The 3 immediately glanced around their surroundings and were amazed by what they were seeing. I didn't think that Gale had this side to him, Netero said before whistling. Who would have thought that this place would be filled with treasures? There were countless weapons, sets of armor, and artifacts, as well as other rare items, neatly arranged within the cavern. Judging by how everything was set up, 13 confirmed that they were dealing with a man with a good head on his shoulders. Remember what I said earlier, okay? 13 stated, don't touch anything. The 7-year-old then pointed to what seemed to be a lavishly designed table with a round mirror perched on top of it. Several miscellaneous artifacts had been placed on top of the table, which 13 believed to be the power source that allowed Arundel to communicate with Gale over long distances. Arthas, who was eyeing the table as well, suddenly saw something lying near the round mirror, prompting him to move toward its location. 13 hurriedly followed behind the Barbarian to ensure that he wouldn't really snatch the amulet, which he believed to have been tampered with by Gale, to warn the city lord if someone were to touch or steal it. There's no doubt about it, Arthas said softly as he took out the other half of the amulet that hung on his neck. It is the other half of my amulet. At that exact moment, both pieces of the amulet glowed faintly, making 13 frown. The next second, the other artifacts on top of the table shone as well, giving the 7-year-old a very bad feeling in his gut. Somewhere in the main continent of Solterra, Arundel sat on his throne with his head resting over the palm of his hand. Suddenly, the gem on the ring of his hand glowed faintly, making him arch an eyebrow. The Magian prince then snapped his fingers, summoning a round mirror that was over 2 meters tall. He stared at it, keeping the same lazy pose he currently had, and waited until the connection stabilized completely. A moment later, an underground cavern appeared in the mirror, making him smile. "Well then, Paven, do you have something to report to me?" Arundel asked. "Are the Tigerkins perhaps ready to go to war?" "Not yet, Your Excellency," Paven replied before lowering his head respectfully. An accident occurred, and the granaries in 3 major cities were set ablaze by unknown individuals. I believe that this was done by a barbarian raiding party who had managed to infiltrate deep within the Sumatran kingdom. Due to this unexpected event, the king is forcing us to prioritize this incident over the war preparations. However, do not fret. Although this is indeed a setback, I will use this incident as propaganda to incite the Tigerkins to wage war on the barbarians. Arundel snorted. "My patience is limited, Paven. You promised me that the war would start in a month. Yet, because of this incident, the war will be pushed back again. I'm very disappointed in you. If you were only as capable as Gale, things would have been over by the next full moon. Forgive me, Your Excellency. This servant is truly incompetent," Paven bowed repeatedly. "Although it will be difficult, I'll do my best to start the war within 2 months. This, I swear." Arundel clicked his tongue in annoyance. 2 months, Paven. If you are unable to start the war within 2 months, I will start myself. Yes, leave it to me, Your Excellency. Paven pressed his fist over his chest and bowed deeply to the Magian prince, making the latter nod. When the Tigerkin could no longer be seen in the mirror, Arundel clicked his tongue for the second time. "I can't wait any longer. The Ostera is almost here." Arundel waved his hand, and the scenery around him changed. The Magian prince arrived on a different plane of existence, where other powerhouses like him gathered to hold conference. There were 13 thrones placed around a round table, representing the seat of power for each prince and princess part of the Order of the Apocalypse. While they didn't consider each other close friends, they did not treat each other as rivals either. Only those who had the power could snatch one of the thrones in their order, and the only way to prove their strength was by killing one of their members. The moment they died, the token imbued in their body, which was proof of their membership in the Order of the Apocalypse, would be transferred to the person who defeated them. This had been a rule of their order since it was first created, and among them, only 6 Magians had managed to keep their position until now. The rest had been replaced by others, and Arundel was one of its newest members. Because of this, he wanted to prove that he was a very competent member of their exclusive group, whose goal was to challenge the deities and finally bring Solterra under their rule. "Arundel, the spring equinox is almost upon us, and you promised to annex the domain of that wretched sea monster, Fornius, before Ostera is over." Giant demi-human redbat, which was at least 3 meters tall, said in a mischievous tone. "You were so confident when you made that declaration, so I thought that it was already a done deal." "The spring equinox is still 3 months away, Commissats," Arundel replied calmly. "I have more than enough time to conquer the Valbera archipelago." Sure. Whatever you say, rookie." Commissats smirked. "If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. I'll only take half of the Valbera archipelago as payment." Arundel didn't even bother to reply, and simply shifted his attention to the Magian princess, who was looking at the countless stars in the sky. Her hands moved in graceful patterns in front of her as she used the heavens as her own personal astral chart, trying to discern what the future held. She was none other than Camrasipa, the Magian princess of prophecy, who sat in the 10th seat of the order. It was her whom Arundel asked to prophesy whether Fornius, the sea serpent and one of the 7 fiends, would come to the aid of the people of the Valbera archipelago if he were to conquer it. Camrasipa had answered her that Fornius wouldn't come, which gave Arundel the confidence to set his sights on the lands in the distant sea. "Hey, Camersepa, do you think Arundel will succeed or not?" Kamisats asked. "Why don't you check the stars and see the outcome of his farce?" "No," Camersepa answered without even glancing at the giant bat, whom they called Kamisats the Untamed, his title coming from the fact that he did whatever he wanted without care for the consequences. "Aw, you're no fun." Kamisats chuckled. "Do you perhaps find knowing the outcome boring?" "No," Camersepa replied. "Whether he succeeds or not is of no importance to me." Unlike the other djinns and magents, Camersepa disliked conflicts. However, she was still interested to see the end of the world, which was why she had a seat in the Order of the Apocalypse. She was one of the 13 original founders of the Order, but now only 6 of them remained. The others had already been defeated by Arundel, Kamisats, and the other new members who were now part of their order. The Order of the Apocalypse only has one motto: the end of the world is only a moment away. They, who had the power to destroy, as well as rule, were at the apex, second only to the deities, whom they didn't dare to offend at this point in time. However, that didn't stop them from eyeing the other worlds, where the dimensional gates opened from time to time. There, they would send their minions, as well as trusted servants, to create a stronghold for them. Camersepa was well respected and recognized in the group because she had already made a foothold on the world called Pangea. Her second-in-command had long conquered the continent of Antares, which was located on the northern side of Pangea. Kamisats had already set things in motion and was targeting the continent of Signy, which was located on the western side of the world. Arundel and him were the 2 rookies of the Order of the Apocalypse. But Kamisats dared what Arundel didn't, and that was to set his sights on the world of the Wanderers, whom the hateful Laplace demon had chosen to fight against them. "Don't forget our bet," Arundel, Kamisats snickered. "If you fail to conquer the Valbera archipelago within the promised time, I'll be getting the wager that is in Camersepa's safekeeping." "Sure," Arundel sneered. "And if I win, I'll be getting the arcana that you promised." Talk after you in the bet, rookie." "Look who's talking. You only became a member 2 months before me. Since you're the last to become a member, then you are the rookie," Kamisats shrugged. "Well then, I'll go now. There's still a continent waiting for me to conquer." After saying those words, the giant red bat turned into countless red bats that flew toward the center of the table before disappearing completely. There were only 2 people left in the conference room, and yet neither of them spoke to the other and simply waited for the other members to appear before them. When the artifacts on the altar started glowing, the first thing Arthas did was grab 13 and Netero and drag them to run away as fast as they could. But the city lord had only managed to grab hold of the 2 of them when he found himself locked in place. It was as if some kind of enchantment was placed on the altar, preventing anyone from going in and out of it after it was activated. Because of this, the 3 could only helplessly stare at the round mirror, waiting for what was about to come. The mirror's surface rippled before showing a face that almost gave the 3 people a heart attack. "Zion, is that you?" Paven blinked in surprise after seeing that his collaborator was on the other side of the mirror, looking back at him with a dumbfounded look on his face. "What are you doing there?" Paven. 13 looked at the Tigerkin in disbelief, because he never expected that the one who would appear before them was the city lord of Parnia's city instead of the Magian prince. "Yes, it's me," Paven said before smiling. "My meeting with Arundel had just ended a while ago, but the round mirror suddenly activated a second time. I thought that he still had something to say to me, so I waited until the connection was established. This is indeed a pleasant surprise." 13 patted his chest in relief, because the worst-case scenario didn't happen, and he looked at Paven with great interest. "This saves me the trouble of contacting you," 13 stated. "You said that you just finished talking to Arundel. What did the 2 of you talk about?" Paven's expression turned solemn after hearing Zion's question. After taking a deep breath, he recounted everything they talked about, making Arthas and Netero frown. "So we only have 2 months. 13's face turned grim after hearing Paven's report. "Did you, by any chance, feel that Arundel would personally make a move during your discussion?" "Although he didn't say it explicitly and only gave me an ultimatum, I believe that he will personally make his move in 2 months, Paven replied. He had the look of someone who would personally solve a problem in order to meet a deadline. I can say with confidence that even if the Tigerkins and the Barbarians don't go to war in 2 months, Arundel and his army will march to the Valbera archipelago. 13 clicked his tongue. 2 months was not enough to convince the Barbarian king and the Tigerkin king to work together and fight against a common enemy. For the first time, 13 felt that he didn't have any means to make it happen. The only method he could think of was to kidnap the Barbarian king and the Tigerkin king and convince them at gunpoint. But he was just a 7-year-old, and the 2 people whom he must kidnap were as strong as his grandfather, Arthur, who was a throne. **T. 13 cursed before shaking his head helplessly. He thought that he would be able to delay the war for 3 months, giving him enough time to worm his way toward the upper ranks of the nobility and gain a private audience with the Barbarian king. 13 wasn't too worried about the Tigerkin king because on that side, he had General Stark, Briella, Anwer, Paven, and Brigham. These people already had a high enough standing in the Sumatran kingdom, not to mention that Briella was also a seer. If she told the king that something was going to happen, there was a very high chance that the leader of all Tigerkins would believe her and act according to her visions. 2 months, 13 thought as he closed his eyes. I still have 2 months. The 7-year-old knew that now wasn't the time to give up. Since he was short on time, he decided to just wing it. Paven, no matter what happens, the Tigerkin army must be ready to move in 2 months, 13 ordered. Also, there is something that I need you to do from your side. 13 explained his plan to the city lord of Pangea City, making the latter blink in confusion. Well, I don't think there's any problem with this request, Paven commented. In fact, the next shipment will be done in a week, just as scheduled. Paven then glanced at the Barbarians, who were listening to their conversation. The Barbarians will do the same on the same day. It's one of the extremely rare activities where both sides don't openly antagonize each other. But, Zion, both sides have shamans stationed to protect that place. Anyone who disturbs the peace will become their enemies. 13 nodded. I know, but if it's shamans, then I'm sure that things will be fine. Paven chuckled. Well, if you weren't this daring, then you wouldn't have been able to make me become your partner in crime. Very well, I'll handle things on this side. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Perhaps a word or two to Anwer. Tell Anwer that I need him to become the king of the underworld in the Sumatran kingdom within a month, 13 replied. I will need all the manpower I can get, so I would really appreciate it if you can help him in this matter, Paven. Consider it done, Paven nodded. Zion, right now, I believe that Gale still has no idea that Lord Arundel wishes to start the war in 2 months. It will be best if the 2 of them don't contact each other again. The old Tigerkin looked at the 7-year-old, making the latter scratch his head. I don't really know Gale, and I have no idea what he will do if he sees that I ransacked everything that belonged to him, 13 said. So, what do you think will happen if he loses contact with Arundel? What do you think he will do next? Paven didn't answer right away. Instead, he took off his glasses and wiped them with a piece of cloth. Half a minute later, he returned it on his head and smirked. He will do the last thing that Arundel ordered him to do, and that is to prepare for war, Paven replied. But since he has no idea when the war will start, he will be left in the dark. But I'm assuming that he will try to send someone to contact me so that we can work together. 13 nodded in understanding. Understood. I will try to contact you again using Visego and Poca. Do not, in any way, try to contact me through the round mirror. Do you understand? Yes, Paven smiled. May the fortune of war shine upon you, Zion. Paven cut off the connection, making the artifacts stop glowing, allowing Arthas and Netero to move again. What now? Arthas asked the boy, who was deep in thought. The city lord of Groner City was still trying to digest everything he had heard, and although he didn't want to believe it, he found himself unable to refute Zion's earlier statement that Gale might be manipulating the war from the shadows. What else? 13 sighed before making a hissing sound. It's time to loot this place. Suddenly, Rocky rose up from the ground and devoured the entire altar, leaving nothing behind. Of course, the Rocky Balboa was not going to stop this soon. After storing the altar inside his body, he then went to devour the rest of the treasures inside the room, leaving nothing behind. Gale, who was in the arena, immediately stood up because the ring on his hand started to feel hot. This was a warning that someone had touched one of the artifacts in his hidden treasury. 13 knew that Gale would be informed if he started stealing his treasures. But so what? By the time the city lord had returned to his residence, there would be nothing for him to see. He, Arthas, and Netero would have been long gone and on their way back to Groner City, bringing with them all of Gale's treasures. "Pops, can you make it on time?" 13 asked Gerald, who now had a troubled look on his face. "I don't know," Gerald commented. "I've never made something like this before." The father and son duo were currently looking at a rough blueprint, which 13 had drawn an hour ago. At first, Gerald thought that 13 had gone mad and was about to ask him to build an attack helicopter from scratch. Fortunately, the blueprint was not the one in his head, but it was still something that he had never attempted to do before. What Gerald was looking at was a ballista, but it was not just any ordinary ballista. It was a ballista that could theoretically launch a 1-ton payload that could travel up to 2 miles. Frankly, this is going to be a monumental task. Gerald could already feel the pressure of having to build the ballista from scratch. Also, you wanted it to be portable, so it needs to have some wheels. This thing is going to be massive. How about we just build your attack helicopter instead of this? I have a feeling that doing that will be easier. Pops, do you think that an attack helicopter can beat a Magen Prince? Of course not. Even if there are hundreds of them, they will not be able to defeat that thing. But do you think this ballista of yours can defeat Arundel? No. 13 shook his head firmly. But it will be the trigger for his defeat. Gerald once again looked at the blueprint in his hand before sighing deeply. What material are we going to use to build this thing? Gerald scratched his head. Wood? Stone? Metals? Can we really finish it in 2 months? We either finish it in 2 months or we kick the bucket, Pops, 13 replied. It's all or nothing. Gerald sighed before ruffling his son's hair, who didn't even offer any resistance. The younger boy knew that his father would go all out to make the weapon that would help them win. However, Tom wasn't really on their side at the moment. 13 knew that after the ballista was built, he would have to reinforce it with dozens or perhaps even hundreds of runes in order to enhance its range, lethality, and mobility. Right now, the 7-year-old no longer had any time to focus on the war, so he left the war preparations of the Tigerkins to Paven. As for the side of the Barbarians, he decided to let Gale, Arthas, and Netero handle it themselves. He was just a 7-year-old. He couldn't handle everything by himself. With this in mind, 13 decided on the only thing that mattered, and that was to prepare to light the beacon of hope. All of his actions would only be poured in this one and only goal. If the plan didn't end up the way he envisioned it to be, at least his father and the other wanderers would still make it back to Pangea. As for him, he and his subordinates could hide inside Rocky and order the Rocky Balboa to dig as deep as he could. He would wait it out until Arundel left the Valbera archipelago, then make a boat that would take him to the main continent. Don't worry, Pops, 13 said. We'll make it happen. Okay, let's do this. Gerald pumped himself up. If we succeed, I will have something to brag to my old man about. 13 watched his father with a faint smile on his face. Since he had promised to his mother, Shasha, and Remy that he would bring back Gerald to Pangea, he would do it using all the means in his disposal. A month passed swiftly, with both the Tigerkins and the Barbarians preparing for the upcoming war. Arthas' pendant was currently inside Rocky's miniature world, preventing Gale from tracking it. During this time, Visego and Poca would regularly carry messages from both sides, allowing everyone to coordinate their movements. 13 and his team left Groner City and built a small stronghold in the Warzur Plains. The area where they chose to build their base was the most ideal location that 13 could position himself during the war. It was 3 miles away from the Furvus Grasslands, as well as 4 miles away from the location of the potential main battlefield, according to Paven's estimate. Young master, everyone is ready to go, Christopher said as he approached the younger boy, who was busy inscribing symbols on the body of the ballista, which was over 15 meters long. 13 had named the Ballista Athena version 1.0, which made everyone look at him weirdly. For the past month, everyone had been working hard to finish the body of this weapon, which was made from wood and steel. Rocky was the MVP who made the gathering of materials possible because he served as the pickup truck carrying everything they needed back to their base. Very well, 13 replied. I'll be done in a few minutes. After imbuing the last rune symbol with the power of a core, the boy was finally able to sigh in relief. Against all odds, they were able to finish the ballista within a month. Now, he only needed to do two things to finish his war preparations. The first one was to deal with his neighbor, the diabolical hyena, which would probably submit to Arundel the moment the latter appeared in the Valbera archipelago. 13 had no intention of letting it live, for its existence would only make the already difficult situation even more difficult. After doing a few stretches, 13 walked out of the cave and saw that everyone who would accompany him was already there and ready to go. Christopher and Rihanna stood beside each other, and behind them were the Wanderers who had prepared intensively for today's battle. Dixon, plus his scouting team, Peyton, and the rest of the Tigerkins were raring to go as well. But that wasn't all. Adira, Arthas, Netero, and 4 more champions who were loyal to the city lord were there as well. Let's go, 13 said before riding on top of Giga Chad, who had now become his personal steed. Time to meet Cranky. Several wagons departed from their base, leaving Gerald and the non-combatants behind. They were going to meet up with the purple-furred honey badger, whom 13 had named Cranky. After nearly a month of negotiations, they finally settled with a deal 4 days ago. In the end, the purple-furred honey badger would help them defeat the diabolical hyena in exchange for its Jinn core, as well as the monster's body parts, with the exception of the hyena's head. The Wanderers and a few of the champions would focus on the diabolical hyena's subordinates, while the rest would help Cranky fight the rank 6 hyena overlord. As they neared the location of their meeting place, 13 and his people could already smell the stench of blood. The purple-furred honey badger laid on the ground as if taking a nap, with several hyena corpses around it. Clearly, it was trying to decrease the number of small fries that would hinder their plans today. The 7-year-old smirked, seeing that Cranky still did things at its own pace. The purple-furred honey badger walked ahead of their battle formation as they marched toward the Furvus Grasslands. The one who initiated the discussion with it was Visago. 13 hadn't gone personally, considering the possibility of the rank 6 overlord attacking him the moment he appeared before it. He had given Visago plenty of conditions he could mention to entice the honey badger, but it didn't budge right away. After several back and forths, the honey badger finally agreed after hearing that it would have reinforcements to help it defeat its enemy. In the past, the rank 6 overlord was the true powerhouse of the Warzur Plains. It went wherever it wanted to go and ate whatever it wanted to eat. No one else was its match, but that all changed after the rank 5 hyena overlord evolved. While there were monsters stronger than Jinns and Magients, the purple-furred honey badger was not one of them. The moment it faced the rank 6 diabolical hyena, it realized their difference in strength, so it fled their battle after it got seriously injured from their clash. It was not an exaggeration to say that the powerful monster that the purple-furred honey badger had bullied in the past had brought down its confidence and arrogance by a peg. It was for this reason that it was very hesitant to confront his enemy again, going as far as changing its hunting grounds and distancing itself from the Furvus Grasslands. But after gaining some reinforcements, it decided to fight against its rival. The purple-furred honey badger wasn't stupid. It knew that once the diabolical hyena had fully consolidated its strength, it would come to hunt it down. There could only be one overlord in the plains, so one of them had to die to make space for the other. When their group finally stepped into the darkness that was unique to the Furvus Grasslands, they immediately heard them. The chuckles of countless hyenas, who seemed to be mocking their futile attempt to defeat their leader, reached their ears. With 9 champions, a few grandmasters, and several monsters in their group, 13 believed that they stood a fighting chance against the rank 6 overlord, which had become part of 13's trials. Unique quest. Quest category: Chain quest. Quest name: The 13 Trials. First trial, completed. Escape the Houdini Desert. Second trial completed. Find a 5-leaf clover. Third trial completed. Make the purple-furred honey badger your ally. Reward. The honey badger won't attack you and your group from now on. Truth be told, 13 found the reward after completing his third trial very funny. But after thinking about it, he understood that he and the purple-furred honey badger were only temporary allies. There was still a chance that after they defeated their common enemy, the two sides would once again become hostile with each other. This was, of course, a very dangerous theoretical situation. After the purple-furred honey badger ate the rank 6 Overlord's beast core, there was a chance that it could evolve into a pseudo-rank 7 Overlord. Of course, there's also a minuscule chance that it would jump straight to become a rank 7 Overlord, making it a very formidable enemy. A rank 6 Overlord and a rank 7 Overlord were two different things. Even if they all worked together, fighting against one would be a monumental task, which was something 13 wanted to avoid at all costs. He already had his hands full with the upcoming war. There was no way that he would choose to increase the number of enemies that he was going to face. But what surprised 13 the most was the reward that he would gain after finishing his fourth trial. Fourth trial. Defeat the rank 6 Overlord, Diabolical Hyena. Reward. You will gain a one-time ability that will prevent you from dying from any attack that can instantly kill you. The 7-year-old never thought for a moment that he was invincible. So, having this one-time ability that would allow him to survive an attack that could instantly kill him was something he needed badly, especially since he was about to fight against a Magian prince. They're here. Dixon, who was on the same wagon as 13, said, "Everyone, battle formation." 13 ordered as everyone mobilized to face off against the hyenas, whose eyes were shining in the distance. Don't forget the strategy that we all agreed on. Let the champions and grandmasters stay at the front. Taiga and Rihanna, you will prioritize attacking those that manage to get past the defenses. Everyone, do your best to survive. Yes, the ogre stood in front of the teenagers, holding spiked steel clubs and spiked steel shields in their hands. Their role was to help protect the teenagers from the hyenas, who greatly outnumbered them. The trolls were also armed with steel swords and spiked steel shields. Their role in the battle was similar to the ogres. Giga Chad was covered in armor with a spiked collar on his neck. The 7-year-old deliberately designed this to ensure that the hyenas would feel a world of pain if they were to bite the Chad skunk's neck during the heat of battle. 13, on the other hand, was mounted on Black's back because he planned to give orders on the battlefield. The Warzer Blackhound could run very fast, and none of the hyenas could outrun it, making it the most suitable mount for keeping the 7-year-old safe at all times. He had given the Warzer Blackhound the same movement technique as Christopher, increasing its escaping abilities to the next level. Hercules, the obsidian tiger beetle, was given the movement technique Roadrunner, negating its weakness of moving slowly. The tiger beetles on the world called Earth were fast-moving insects, but the obsidian tiger beetle was quite the opposite. Due to its sturdy shell that covered its body like a tank, it was unable to move quickly on land, making it a very bad hunter. The only saving grace was that this monster species had evolved to become omnivores, allowing their diet to be flexible. Now that its limiter had been removed, it was now capable of bulldozing its way through the battlefield, ramming the hyenas with its hard shell and sending them all flying. Rocky, on the other hand, was ordered to launch sneak attacks from under the ground, destroying the enemy's formation. Taiga also received a special technique from 13, and it was called Emperor's Might. However, the Tigerkin was knocked unconscious when the 7-year-old planted this skill in his body to prevent him from knowing how he gained the skill. His former ability, King's Might, only increased his body's performance by half. But Emperor's Might doubled his strength, speed, agility, and dexterity, making him stronger than ever before. During that 1 month, Percival and his team started to hunt together with the trolls, increasing their strength to become adepts, which were equivalent to rank 2 monsters. With the power of Emperor's Might, his power would jump straight to the apostle rank, making him deadlier on the battlefield. The purple-furred honey badger, aka Cranky, hissed the moment it saw the giant diabolical hyena approaching behind all of its subordinates. The rank 6 overlord hyena let out an eerie chuckle that reverberated in the surroundings. It was planning to hunt down the purple-furred honey badger in a week, but since its prey had come knocking on its doorstep, it would no longer allow it to escape like it had the last time the two of them fought. The eerie chuckle of the hyenas spread in the surroundings, making the wanderers subconsciously grip their weapons firmly in their hands. All of them had been fighting a lot during the past month, and they had grown confident of their abilities and teamwork. Some of the wanderers even managed to get avatars from the monsters they had killed, gaining a capable companion who'd assist them by their side. Rihanna, who was mounted on top of her black horse, Lancelot, held a bow in her hands. She had become more proficient in archery, and she could now accurately fire arrows in rapid succession while mounted on Lancelot's back. Right now, all of them were armed to the teeth, thanks to 13's father, Gerald. Crafting pseudo-silver weapons wasn't a big deal to him, so all the wanderers received a free weapon and armor upgrade. Since pseudo-silver weapons and armors were still technically bronze rank, all the wanderers could use them without problems. The two sides faced off for a few minutes before the diabolical hyena roared, ordering its subordinates to attack. Emboldened by their leader's order, the hyenas surged forth like a tide, running toward the delicious morsels who had come to offer themselves to them on a silver platter. The favorite food of jinns were wanderers, so the hyenas were feeling giddy seeing so many of them in one place. But just when they were halfway toward their targets, the ground under their feet rose up, and a 10-meter-long rocky balboa emerged. Rocky swung its tail, sending several hyenas flying before diving back to the ground. It was a rank 5 monster, so it was stronger than the hyenas. However, it was no match against the rank 6 overlord, so it made sure to only launch sneak attacks on locations that were a good distance away from the monster. Although some of their brethren were injured, the hyenas didn't stop running and continued to charge toward their targets. "Give them hell, Giga!" 13 ordered when the hyenas were only 100 meters away from them. 13 had blessed the Chad skunk with 2 divine abilities. The first one was called Titan's Heart, allowing him to gain the size and strength of a titan. The second one was Corrosion King, giving the Chad skunk the power to imbue his fangs, claws, and his powerful fart with corrosive properties. Hearing his master's command, Giga Chad activated his divine technique, Titan's Heart, tripling his body size in an instant. The 6-meter-tall skunk then turned his body around and unleashed its diabolical spray that now gained corrosive properties that could erode even metal. Giga Chad was only a rank 2 monster, so its corrosive abilities weren't that strong. However, once it evolved into a rank 5 monster, its corrosive ability would be able to melt metal, making him a very dangerous adversary. "Light it up, Christopher," 13 ordered. "Yes, young master," Christopher replied as he used the torch in his hand to light the oil-soaked arrow that 13 was holding. The 7-year-old watched as the Chad skunk's spray landed on the hyenas that were 100 meters away from them. The moment the corrosive spray hit their bodies, the hyenas immediately suffered burns, making them yelp in pain. Those who were unlucky enough to be hit in the eyes lost their vision, accidentally ramming on the hyenas beside them. A moment later, the sound of whistling wind reached their ears. The hyenas didn't even have time to react before an explosion that lit up the darkness of the Furvus grasslands spread like wildfire, engulfing the hyenas that were within its range. Netero whistled after seeing such a scene, making him regret the fact that he didn't manage to get the winning bid for the Chad skunk during the auction. If only he knew that the rank 2 monster was this powerful, he would have definitely thickened his face and accepted 13's offer to give the monster to him as a way to appease his anger. "Aim!" Rihanna shouted, prompting all the wanderers who were currently holding bows in their hands to draw their bows. "Fire!" As soon as she gave the orders, she released the arrow from her hand, making it fly toward the hyenas that were approaching their location. The wanderers only received basic arrow training, so they weren't proficient in aiming. However, they already knew how far their arrows could go. Because of this, they didn't really need to aim, so they confidently released their arrows, making arrows rain on the hundreds of hyenas who managed to break past the wall of fire and embed themselves on their bodies. "Brace!" 13 ordered, making the ogres raise their shields in preparation to block the advance of the incoming hyenas. Christopher, Ariel, and Jasmine were all mounted on the Warzer black hounds that had decided to stay with Blackie and assist the humans in battle. They were ordered to not engage the enemies no matter what. Brutus and Bruno were also there to protect them. When the hyenas were only a dozen meters away from their enemies, the champion stepped up and unleashed a barrage of attacks, which crippled, blinded, and killed countless hyenas. But since the hyenas had greater numbers, several of them managed to run past the champion's defenses. They then lunged at the wanderers, who were more than ready to give them a deadly welcome. The teenage boys and girls, alongside the tigerkins, picked up the steel spears beside them and formed a wall of steel spikes, piercing the bodies of the hyenas and drawing blood. The purple-furred honey badger didn't remain idle either and started to massacre the hyenas who had come within its range. Blood and flesh littered the ground as the roars, screeches, and howls of the monsters spread in the surroundings. Seeing that half of its forces were unable to annihilate the enemy, the diabolical hyena started running to join the fray. Arthas, Netero, and the other champions from Groner City all prepared to assist the purple-furred honey badger, whose eyes had already locked on the body of his mortal enemy. But the honey badger didn't make a move to charge forward. Instead, it waited patiently for its enemy to come within the striking range of its allies so that they could all gang up on the monster, giving them a fighting chance for victory. 13 knew. He knew full well that he was not a hero who would save everyone he came across. He was more of a villain who wouldn't hesitate to use whatever means necessary to achieve his goals. This was why he had come up with this plan to fight against the rank 6 overlord, diabolical hyena, to prepare himself for the inevitable. He wasn't a saint, and he already expected that there would be casualties in this battle. But when one of the wanderers was about to be killed by a hyena, a troll pushed her away and used a shield to block the blow. The spiked shield and the hyena's teeth clashed, creating sparks, and sent the troll flying backward. Perhaps angered by the annoying monster who had gotten in its way, the hyena lunged at the helpless troll who was still lying on the ground. 13 could already foresee the troll's demise. But before he knew it, he had already released the arrow in his bow, which flew toward the hyena's eye, making it wince in pain mid-jump, breaking its concentration. The troll took that opportunity to roll on the ground to distance itself from the hyena and regain its footing. 13 fired another arrow. This time, he targeted the hyena's other eye, turning it completely blind. The wanderers and the trolls then attacked the monster at the same time, killing it completely. "Nice shot, young master." Christopher, who had seen everything from beginning to end, praised 13 for saving the troll. "If you have time to praise me, then you have time to shoot," 13 said as he knocked another arrow on his bow and released it not long after. "Less talking, more shooting." "Yes, master," Christopher replied before he, too, unleashed an arrow from his bow. The 7-year-old was still surprised that his body chose to subconsciously save the troll instead of letting it die. This battle was nothing compared to what they were going to face in the future, so 13 originally intended to prepare himself for the worst-case scenario of losing several allies in battle. At first, he didn't plan on helping the troll, which was one of his slaves, so that he would be able to gauge his feelings once it died. But his body moved subconsciously and fired the arrow faster than his mind could think. "Maybe deep inside me, I don't want to lose anyone," 13 thought, narrowing his eyes as he released an arrow aimed at a hyena that had knocked a wanderer to the side with its claw. "Even if I'm against a Magian prince, I will make sure that my people will not die so easily." With his newfound resolve, 13's arrows flew across the battlefield, always finding their mark, saving those who were about to suffer a gruesome and painful death. Even Visego and Polka descended to the chaotic battle with their claws spread wide, scratching the eyes of the hyenas in their path. Giga Chad, who was protecting several wanderers, was attacked by 3 hyenas at the same time. Currently, The Chad skunk stood 6 meters tall and fought like a crazed bear, its claws shining with corrosive acid. It also didn't hesitate to bite his opponents, tearing their flesh apart. The hyenas attacking him were rank 3 monsters, while Gigachad was only a rank 2 monster. But due to the effect of Titan's heart, which gave him the size and strength of a giant, his battle capabilities rose up to that of a rank 3 monster as well. The armor protecting his body also played a critical role, protecting Gigachad's vitals and decreasing the damage he received from the hyenas. Truth be told, Gigachad had a total of 2 divine techniques and 1 silver grade technique, all given to him by 13. The 2 divine techniques were Titan Heart and Corrosion King. The silver grade technique was called Bestial Fury. What it did was increase the Chad skunk's fighting ability and give it some kind of intimidation aura, which weakened its enemies by a small percentage. 13 truly pampered Gigachad. Just like Tiona and Christopher, he knew that the fluffy guy would not betray him. However, since he already had 2 divine techniques in his body, adding 1 more would put too much strain on Gigachad. Putting this into consideration, 13 settled for a silver grade technique that would complement the Chad skunk's battle style. Just as the battle raged on, one of the hyenas managed to bite Gigachad's arm, making him scream in pain. At that moment, Rocky rose up from the ground and used his tail to smash the hyena's head, releasing its hold on the Chad skunk's arm. Suddenly, a tigerkin whose hands and feet were covered with golden flames appeared in front of the hyena and used his claws to slash the side of the hyena's face, setting it ablaze. Percival didn't even wait to see the aftermath of his attack before he charged at another hyena, who was giving the Wanderers a hard time. Although he didn't know how he gained such an overwhelming power, he believed that this was given to him to protect the people around him. 13 gave the tigerkin a sidelong glance before ordering Gigachad to retreat and allow one of the Wanderers who had gained a healing artifact to heal his injuries. Just as the 7-year-old was about to attack another monster in the distance, he heard a loud roar, making him glance in the direction where the diabolical hyena and the purple-furred honey badger were currently fighting. "Tiona, it's up to you now," 13 said. The small black snake that was coiled on his neck nodded her head in understanding. 13 ordered Blackie to run to where Christopher was. Although it was a little dangerous, he decided to take the gamble, one that would allow them to maximize the rewards that they would get from this battle between the 2 overlords, whose claws and teeth were soaked with each other's blood. Cranky had learned its lesson when it fought against the rank 5 overlord in the past. The purple-furred honey badger was confident in its strength, so when it ambushed its prey, it didn't think much of the subordinates that were protecting it. It had been the top predator in the Warzur Plains, so it never fought against hundreds of monsters that were led by an overlord. It had been too confident of its abilities, not caring how many enemies it faced. However, when all the hyenas decided to swarm it with numbers, it realized that dealing with them was not as easy as it expected. Because of this, the rank 5 hyena overlord managed to evolve by cannibalizing its own subordinates, allowing it to gain a strength that even surpassed the purple-furred honey badger. Having learned that lesson, Cranky decided to fight alongside the champions whom 13 had asked to support it. Since the enemy had its subordinates, why couldn't it have its own lackeys to fight? So, the purple-furred honey badger started to fight dirty. It used hit-and-run tactics, allowing the champions to deal damage to the hyena, whose crimson eyes glowed with hate and anger. Cranky would launch sneak attacks in the hyena's blind spots, drawing blood. But the diabolical hyena had learned from their skirmish and soon managed to bite the purple-furred honey badger's claw during one of its attempts to strike it from behind. Fortunately, the other champions didn't watch idly and bombarded the hyena's head with spells, forcing it to release its hold on its enemy. Of course, the lower-ranked hyenas didn't watch idly either and assisted their leader in battle. Unfortunately for them, Adira and Netero, who was tasked to focus on the small fries, mercilessly slaughtered them as quickly as they could. The Drow's specialty was controlling shadow and darkness, making her a terrifying opponent inside the Furvus Grasslands. Netero, on the other hand, had an uncanny ability to transform the ground around him into 4-meter-long earth spikes, which easily pierced through the hyenas' bodies. He also created a wall that prevented the other hyenas from supporting their leader, who was getting gang-banged by Cranky and the 3 champions who were helping it fight the diabolical hyena. 13 had asked Arthas about the abilities of his forces so that he could devise a strategy that would increase their chances of victory. Although the city lord hesitated for a while, he also understood that he couldn't afford to hold back any information that was crucial for this battle. The battle continued for an hour, forcing everyone past their limits. The purple-furred honey badger had a deep gash on its back, which was bleeding profusely. However, due to its strong regenerative abilities, 13 was sure that it wouldn't die from blood loss. However, the diabolical hyena was just as menacing. Although it was a bloody mess, it didn't show any signs of kicking the bucket yet. In fact, its ferocity even increased the more injured it became. Adira, Netero, and the other champions were also nearing their limit. The 5-rank 5 alpha hyenas, which served as the diabolical hyena's personal guards, were nothing to scoff at. After managing to break through Netero's earth spikes, they held back the champions who were assisting Cranky in its fight against their leader. The battle had come to a stalemate and seemed to have no end in sight. 13, who was also panting for breath, eyed the battlefield, looking for an opportunity to turn the tables. Almost everyone on his side was exhausted, not even having the strength to move from where they stood. Suddenly, he heard the hooting of an owl in the distance, making him glance at the east. The sound of rumbling reverberated in the Furvus grasslands as dozens of saber-toothed tigers charged in the direction of their battlefield. The barbarians, as well as the wanderers, felt anxious because there was only one race who used saber-toothed tigers as mounts. The Tigerkins, who were part of 13's group, all looked in the distance with disbelief as their brethren uttered their war cries and charged in their direction. Arthas and the other barbarians immediately retreated to where 13 and the others were, forcing Cranky to run alongside them. The purple-furred honey badger had the guys, where are you going? Expression on its face, wondering why his backup was leaving it behind. Christopher, get ready, 13 ordered, as he urged Blackett to run towards Cranky. The chubby boy followed behind his young master, leaving Jasmine and Ariel behind. Hercules, who had been protecting Christopher all along, also ran behind the 2 Warzer blackhounds, ready to shield the 2 children from any danger. Cranky, follow me, 13 shouted. Time to end this. Seeing that the 2 boys were charging toward the diabolical hyena and not away from it, the purple-furred honey badger changed its course and ran alongside them. Perhaps knowing that it was now truly in danger, the diabolical hyena decided to retreat, but it was already too late. The 100-strong saber-tooth legion descended on it like a pack of wolves, giving it no chance to run. What took you so long? 13 complained as he looked at Anwer, who had a devilish smile on his face. We had to take a detour so that we won't be seen by the barbarians on this side, Anwer replied. Don't worry, we will finish the job properly. The Tigerkin then raised his hand and gave the order to go for the kill. Anwer had brought with him 10 champions and 90 grandmasters. This was an elite unit composed of several mercenary groups from the Sumatran kingdom. Seeing that the newcomers were all on its side, the purple-furred honey badger let out a resounding screech, as if telling its nemesis that it was now time for round 2. Because all the hyenas were already exhausted, the mercenary group's attack ended up as a one-sided massacre. Even the 5-rank 5 alpha hyenas were no match against these battle-hardened individuals who specialized in killing monsters in the wild. Having no subordinates to help it, the rank 6 overlord found itself surrounded from all sides. 13 watched with fascination as the Tigerkins threw dozens of grappling hooks that wrapped itself on the diabolical hyena's legs, embedding themselves in its skin. All the saber-toothed tigers then pulled at the same time, preventing the monster from moving. Using that opportunity, 5 of the mercenary leaders took the initiative to attack one of its legs, crippling it completely. Seeing that its enemy had fallen to the ground, Cranky lunged at the hyena and landed on its back. It then bit hard on its enemy's neck, pinning on the ground. "Go, Tiona, Christopher," 13 ordered. Tiona immediately hardened her body, transforming into a black arrow, which Christopher knocked onto his bow. He pulled back the string as far as he could and took aim at the struggling, diabolical hyena. The chubby boy was only 15 meters away from the monster, so it wasn't a problem to hit his target at this range. Tom seemed to slow down at that moment as Christopher stared at his target. An eerie calmness permeated his heart, making him only focus on the monster in front of him. He was no master archer, but after 13 had bestowed upon him the cheap shot savant martial skill, archery became a lot easier for him. Although he would still miss his target from time to time, he trained every day for an entire month. So the moment he released Tiona from his hand, he knew the result before time seemed to return to its normal flow. Tiona pierced through the eye of the diabolical hyena, but she didn't stop there. Using her ability, Ferocious Flesh Eater, Tiona chewed her way towards the monster's brain and embedded her fangs directly on it, secreting all the venom that was stored inside her body. Half a minute later, the rank 6 overlord stopped struggling and breathed its last breath. Cranky, who felt the demise of his foe, raised its head arrogantly and screeched loudly. At the same time, Christopher saw a message appear inside his mind and almost fell off from the Warzer Blackhound's back due to disbelief. He had gained a rank 6 monster as an avatar, which made him shout out loud as if he had won the lottery.